Chapter 766. When Wuxia dragged Wuxia over, both the Lu and Thousand Masks tribesmen hurriedly moved aside, keeping at least 10 steps away from him. The scene just now was too strange. They hadn't completely regained their senses, and they couldn't understand it. Before their minds could catch up, their bodies had already stepped aside. This was a reflexive action in the face of danger. Xiaofan looked at the sword in Wuxia's hand. It was obviously from the other side of the sea, different from the style used by tribesmen. However, the craftsmanship was not as good as the Wuxia families, so he couldn't tell which organization these people belonged to. "How did you get hit?" asked Xiaofan. With Wuxia's abilities, he shouldn't have been stabbed so easily. "I wanted to ask something, but that person suddenly attacked," said Wuxia calmly. Xiaofan didn't ask who stabbed him. Judging by the blood on Wuxia's hand, he knew what happened to that person. However, after this incident, Wuxia definitely understood that the people outside were not as nice as the people in Yanjiao. People outside the tribe would kill at the slightest disagreement. Xiaofan looked at the people around him, then asked Yanjiao, who he was most familiar with, "Is there a place to rest? This isn't a good place to talk." "Yes, yes, yes." Yanjiao nodded quickly, then informed by Xing before bringing Xiaofan to a house. Xiaofan, does your friend need treatment?" Yanjiao glanced at the silent Wuxia and asked Xiaofan. "No, this small injury is nothing to him," said Xiaofan. Bai Xing and Dianfa, who were further away, also heard Xiaofan's words. They were even more shocked. This small injury? Wuxia was stabbed, how could it be a small injury? Dianfa's face twitched, but he didn't say a word. He didn't know what to say either. It seemed like the Lu tribe was really going to ask Yanjiao for help. Fight with Yanjiao for a person? Dianfa didn't plan to do that for now. He couldn't find the best solution for the time being, so he glared fiercely at the Lu tribesman. After Xiaofan walked away, he asked, "Are you going to join Yanjiao?" The elders of the Lu tribe looked away awkwardly. They didn't want to meet Dianfa's eyes, nor did they say anything. In fact, they were also conflicted. The Yanjiao people would definitely have other demands. If their demands were even more unacceptable than the Thousand Masks tribes, what should they do? Or perhaps, with the help of the Yanjiao tribes, they could get through this calamity first. Some elders of the Lu tribe agreed. According to their thinking, migrating the tribe or merging the fire seed was a matter of life and death for the tribe. How could they make such a hasty decision? He had to think things through. To put it bluntly, they had to drag it out for as long as they could. They had to get through this difficult situation first. While Dianfa was hesitating about whether to stay in the Lu tribe and observe, Yanjiao had already told Xiaofan about the situation. Just as Xiaofan had predicted, the Lu tribe situation was worse than what was written in the letter. However, Xiaofan was puzzled. They were already in such a situation, but these people were still hesitating. What are your chief and shaman thinking? If they don't agree to merge the fire seed, we can't let the Lu tribe go. Xiaofan also told them about Yanjiao's request. Merging the fire seed was a prerequisite. Otherwise, there was nothing to talk about. Of course, if the Lu tribe didn't choose to merge the fire seed, they would only come to help the Lu tribe clean up the surrounding forest. Then, they would pack up and leave. They wouldn't care about anything else. Yanjiao also had a headache. He was actually in favor of merging the fire seed. Although they wouldn't get used to it in a short period of time, the other tribes had already merged their fire seed. If they stayed the same, their fire seed would become their weakness. However, the elders of the tribe didn't agree. "How about this? Go and talk to your chief, shaman, and the elders. Tell them about Yanjiao's conditions." Xiaofan didn't want the Lu tribe to go. It would be good if they went, but if they didn't go, Yanjiao wouldn't lose anything. After all, they didn't lack food. Yanjiao let Xiaoxian rest here first. He would go and talk to the people in the tribe. What he didn't tell Xiaoxian was that the Lu tribe would definitely migrate. They couldn't survive here anymore. Putting aside the troubles around them, just the internal problems of the Lu tribe. They raised livestock for a living. The ancestors of the Lu tribe settled here because they found a pond that was enough for them to live and raise livestock. However, the pond had dried up during the disaster. At that time, the previous chief suggested that they migrate. Unfortunately, the elders of the tribe strongly opposed it. Later on, there was also the matter of the fire seed, so it had been delayed until now. Yanjiao's head hurt when he thought about the looks of those elders in the tribe. Yanjiao relayed Xiaoxian's words to the others. Some of them agreed to merge with the fire seed and move to Yanjiao. Some objected because they didn't want to merge with the fire seed. There were also some who didn't agree or disagree. It was a stalemate again. Bai Xing sat at the head of the table and didn't say anything. His eyes were staring at a certain spot, but they weren't focused. He allowed the others to argue while he thought about other things. After a while, Bai Xing suddenly asked, "When will the other people from Yanjiao arrive?" Yanjiao, who was also in a daze, was nudged by someone beside him. He came back to his senses and said, "About half a day. They'll be here by tonight at the latest." Bai Xing grunted and didn't ask any more. He continued to daydream. After Bai Xing's interruption, the elders stopped arguing. Someone asked Bai Xing a question, but Bai Xing ignored it. His rough face still had a look that said, "I'm daydreaming, don't bother me." Knowing that Bai Xing, the new chief, was in a bad mood, the elders didn't look too good either. For a moment, the room fell silent. The sun gradually set. Xiaoxian went to take a look at Wuxia. The person who was dragged back by Wuxia looked like he had nothing left to live for. That person thought that he would be forced to reveal some secrets after being dragged back. He planned to grit his teeth and not say anything, or make up some lies to fool these tribesmen. However, he didn't expect that this person would ask him questions that he didn't even know how to answer. "Which tribe is your ancestor from? When did your tribe merge with the fire seed? What does it feel like to merge with the fire seed? Why did you abandon your tribe and join other groups? Why did the tribe disband? How can a person not have a tribe?" That person really didn't know how to answer these questions. Why did the tribe disband? How would he know? As long as he was happy, why did he need a reason? He thought that Wuxia was crazy. His way of thinking was like that of a stubborn and conservative tribesman. Why must people exist in the form of a tribe? These tribesmen were a bunch of country bumpkins. In the end, that person got impatient and cursed at Wuxia's ancestors. Wuxia wasn't satisfied with this answer. The result of Wuxia's dissatisfaction was that the person's neck was broken. "I'm going out for a while," Wuxia said. "For what?" Xiaoxian asked. "Ask someone else." Wuxia put on his hood and walked out. There were still many people in the forest around the Lu tribe. He had to use this opportunity to ask more people. When the Yanjiao people came, they would probably be scared away. Whether it was people from the other side of the sea or tribesmen who had merged with the fire seed, he wanted to ask them all. He especially wanted to ask the tribesmen who had just merged with the fire seed. He wanted to know their thoughts. Wuxia was very persistent in this aspect. Xiaoxian didn't stop him. "Be careful of your head." After all, Wuxia wasn't a puppet. Puppets could still be controlled to move without a head, but Wuxia didn't know what would happen to him if he lost his head. Not long after Wuxia left the Lu tribe, Xiaoxian heard an eagle cry in the sky. "They're here." Not far from the forest outside the Lu tribe, a group of people was running towards them. They even rested for a while before coming here to adjust their condition. The movement of 500 people was naturally different from that of Xiaofan and Wuxia. The people hiding in the forest had already noticed them. It's the Yanjiao people. Some people could recognize them from the totemic patterns on their bodies. Are the Yanjiao people that strong? This was someone who wasn't familiar with Yanjiao. Who cares if they're Yanjiao people or other people? Our target is the Lu tribe. This was a group of people from the other side of the sea. Some people were already scared and started retreating further away. However, they didn't leave. Their greed made them want to take advantage of the situation. Some people moved closer to take a closer look. In front of the group, there was a bird about the same size as the Lu tribe's dumb bird. It didn't have big wings either, but its body wasn't as fat as the Lu tribe's dumb bird. Its head was even bigger. What kind of bird is that? Someone whispered to his companion. I don't know, but I'm sure we can roast it like the Lu tribe's birds. The person who spoke had just stolen a dumb bird from the Lu tribe this morning. He was still holding a bone with meat on it. As he chewed on the meat in his hand, he observed the group that was passing by. Someone's here, Guang said while riding on the forest racos. I can smell it, the others beside him said. The group of people in the forest didn't seem to want to hide completely. Otherwise, the Yanjiao group wouldn't be able to smell the roasted meat. How arrogant. Guang glanced at the forest. He reached for an arrow from his quiver and knocked it on his bow. The bowstring creaked as he pulled it. Bang! The vibrations of the bowstring seemed to be plucking at the nerves in one's brain, causing them to tremble. The arrow pierced through the gaps between the branches and broke through the leaves in front of it. The leaves that came into contact with the arrow were instantly pulverized. Before the sneer of the person who had been talking to his accomplice could fade away, he was interrupted by a whistle-like sound that rapidly drew closer. Bang! The arrow pierced into a tree trunk that was thick enough for 5 people to encircle. The entire arrow sank into the tree trunk. On the other side of the tree, the person who was leaning against the tree widened his eyes and looked down at his chest. The roasted meat in his hand fell to the ground. The green arrowhead had pierced through the tree trunk and left a hole in his chest. There was still red blood on the arrowhead. The blood flowed out along the arrowhead and dripped onto the ground. The other people around them couldn't help but cry out in fear and anger. However, when they heard the footsteps coming their way, they didn't dare to stay here. They didn't even care about their companions who were still breathing. One by one, they threw away the roasted meat in their hands and turned to run into the distance. The surrounding birds were frightened by the murderous aura of the arrow. They screamed and flew into the sky. Jian Fa stood at the border of the Lu tribe and looked at the flock of birds in the forest. His eyes were dark and unreadable. Soon, he saw a group of people coming out of the forest. There were 2 fearsome beasts in the lead. One looked like a bird while the other looked a little strange. It looked like a tiger or wolf in the forest. However, it had hooves and made a clattering sound when it stepped on the ground. Bai Xing and the others who were discussing things in the house quickly came out when they heard the commotion. We're finally here. Xiaofan walked over and looked at the net bags in the group. Guang and the others saw this and dragged the net bags over. Inside were people who were already dead. Their bodies were either cut by sharp weapons or shot by arrows. There was even a person with a hole in his chest. Blood was still flowing out. These are... Bai Xing looked at the people in the net bags. We hunted them when we passed through the forest, the person dragging the net bags said. Oh right, Grand Elder, we saw Wuxia when we passed through the forest. He said he would be in the forest tonight and told us not to worry about him, a Yanjiao warrior said. Okay, you all must be tired from the journey. Rest first, Xiaofan said as he looked at Yanjiao. Yanjiao had already arranged accommodation and food. When he saw Xiaofan looking at him, he quickly said, "Yes, yes. Everyone, follow me. You must be tired. Have some meat soup." "Brother Xian, what about it?" Guang pointed at the forest raccoons. Xiaofan thought for a moment and said to Yanjiao, "Didn't you say that the stupid birds in your animal pen are often stolen? Let Xiao Jing go there. There's a nest there anyway. It can be guarded." Yanjiao wanted to say, "Your bird eats meat." However, he paused and said, "Okay, bring it to the animal pen." Xiaofan patted the forest raccoon's head with the back of his knife and said, "Guard it well. Don't worry, Brother Xian. I told it along the way." Guang flipped his braid and smiled brightly. Yanjiao was confused. What did they say to the bird along the way? He suddenly changed his mind. Was it really okay to put this ferocious bird in the pen of those stupid vegetarian birds? Guang took the forest raccoons and followed Yanjiao to the animal pen. The animal pen for the stupid birds occupied a large area in the Lu tribe. There were also many bird nests. Because of the continuous theft, many bird nests were empty. When Guang led the forest raccoons into the animal pen, a group of stupid birds who were walking casually ran away as soon as they saw a stranger. Those who were squatting in their nests also ran away, so there were more bird nests empty. "Choose one to sleep in." Guang patted the forest raccoons and said. Yanjiao was frightened to see the big-headed ferocious bird raise its claws and look at the bird nests one by one. Then it chose the biggest one and walked in. After stepping on it, it squatted down. "Okay, let's go." Guang didn't look at it anymore and turned to leave. Is it really okay?" Yanjiao was still scared. "It's definitely okay. It won't eat. If there's one less, you can deduct it from Yanjiao's reward." Yanjiao didn't say anything. So these people were so eager to guard the animal pens just to get their reward from Yanjiao? Yanjiao's people had already arrived. It was time for the Lu tribe to make a final decision. Jian Fa didn't leave yet. He was waiting for the Lu tribe's decision. Xiaofan wasn't in a hurry. No matter what the Lu tribe's decision was, they would rest for the night and clean up the forest tomorrow. Their goal wasn't just to decide if the Lu tribe would move or not. In the forest, the people who were hiding in various places were already starting to get anxious. Should they stay here and wait for a chance to make some money, or should they run away first? Judging from the looks of it, Yanjiao wasn't easy to deal with. Chapter 767. There were fewer birds in the forest at night, probably because there were people hiding there. The Lu tribesmen used to hear nocturnal birds chirping at night, but now there were fewer nocturnal birds. Therefore, the night was much quieter. Tonight was the quietest night. In the past, there would occasionally be strange shouts or wild laughter in the forest. Tonight, those sounds were gone. The Lu tribesmen knew that it wasn't because the people hiding there had left, but because of the arrival of the Yanjiao people. Those people had all gone into hiding. They watched quietly in the dark. They didn't give up on this fat piece of meat so easily. In the forest, a few people hid in one place, looking in the direction of the Lu tribe. "Hey, do you guys think we should go to the Lu tribe's animal pen tonight and drag one out to eat? I'm a little hungry," someone whispered. In the past, when they were outside, they didn't have to eat a lot of good food. They just ate whatever they could find, as long as they didn't starve to death. In order to get more good food, they didn't care that much about food. But after living near the Lu tribe for a while, their appetites had grown. Ordinary food really couldn't satisfy them. It was hard to go from luxury to frugality. When the others heard this, they also thought of the Lu tribe's birds covered in meat and the smell of barbecued meat. Suddenly, their saliva secreted faster. Even the fragrance of the flowers in the forest at night smelled like barbecued meat. "Why don't we go take a look?" They were about to go to the Lu tribe's animal pen when they suddenly stopped. They frowned and looked in a direction. They didn't wear much clothing, and more than half of their limbs were exposed. Their skin could become extremely sensitive, especially at night. Their hair stood on end, but this didn't mean that they were afraid. Unlike other people, these people used the hair on their skin to perceive the movements around them at night. They were like the tentacles of a beast, able to perceive the airflow fluctuations caused by the friction between the bodies of the people around them and the air. At this moment, they felt someone approaching. "They're here." Not long after, they heard the sound of footsteps. It wasn't someone from their group. The footsteps sounded strange. The time between each step was almost the same, and the strength of each step was similar. Just listening to the sound gave them a strange feeling. Who wouldn't be cautious when walking at night? Even if they had better eyesight than ordinary people at night, they still had basic precautions. However, the other party seemed to have no scruples at all. He was neither hurried nor slow, and every step he took was like a stroll. What was his motive for suddenly appearing here? Soon, they saw a figure slowly walking over from the forest in the distance. Other than the sound of footsteps and the soft sound of his calves rubbing against the grass, there was no other sound. He couldn't even hear the sound of breathing. They thought that this was the other party's method of concealment at night. The person didn't wear many clothes and was bald, so they didn't recognize him. Whoosh! A branch shot out from a nearby tree like an arrow and pierced into the person's foot. This meant that he had stopped. Wuxia looked at the branches in front of him and then looked up at the trees around him. There was no one around, but he knew that there were people hiding in the trees. "I have a question," Wuxia said calmly. There was no sound around them. They could only hear the soft sound of insects crawling on one of the trees. Wuxia continued asking, "Are you people who left your original tribe and gathered together again?" He could feel that the blood flowing through their bodies was similar. The person hiding in the tree initially thought that the other party was also one of the people who had designs on the Lu tribe and came over to discuss cooperation. Who would have thought that he would ask such a question? Was he crazy? While Wuxia was waiting for an answer, a black figure suddenly jumped out from the tree closest to him. The other party had a knife in his hand. The curve of the blade was exaggerated, almost forming a circle. The blade was covered in a layer of black so that it wouldn't reflect any light at night. The speed of the other party's knife was extremely fast. It moved around in the air several times like a ghost, making it difficult to see where the knife would land. The blade sliced through the air, making a whooshing sound. Wuxia knew that this person was aiming for his neck. Many people would aim for fatal areas such as the heart or the carotid artery. After all, no matter how strong a person's body was, it would be difficult for them to survive such an injury. At first, Wuxia didn't want to dodge. It wouldn't matter if his carotid artery was cut. He didn't have any blood to lose anyway. However, when he thought about how Xiaofan said that he wouldn't be able to survive without a head, Wuxia hesitated. The knife looked like it was going for his neck, but what if it cut his head off? Everything happened in an instant. From the other party's point of view, Wuxia only paused for a moment. Soon, Wuxia dodged the knife. He wasn't afraid of the knife at all. He shook his shoulder and collided with the other party. Wuxia's body was stronger than the Yanjiao people. His bones were even harder than the Yanjiao totemic warriors. The person who attacked Wuxia didn't look weak either. In fact, if Wuxia and the other person were to be compared at the same time, the other person looked stronger. However, at the moment of collision, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. The other person was sent flying and landed heavily on the trunk of a tree. The crown of the tree shook from the impact. It looked like the leaves were about to fall off. The knife didn't injure the other party. Instead, one of the people on his side was sent flying. At this moment, the other people hiding in the tree were shocked. After a short moment, they surrounded Wuxia. They could tell that Wuxia was a very strong person. They had to work together to win. They didn't think about what would happen if they lost. After all, no matter how strong a totemic warrior was, he would be crippled under such a joint attack. The sound of joints cracking could be heard. Long claws popped out like the claws of wild beasts. It wasn't clear if the claws were special to their bones or if they were made of metal. They twisted their wrists and their fingers were like spinning knives. They slashed towards Wuxia. Wherever they went, the air hissed. They were like poisonous snakes hunting in the dark. There were also people with strange knives in their hands. They slashed towards Wuxia with a cold light that couldn't be seen in the dark. The 5 of them attacked Wuxia with the weapons they were used to. The sound of punches and kicks, the sound of knives hitting hard objects, the sound of bones breaking, and the screams of people mixed together. It sounded like the cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. Even the trees in the area were shaking. The sound spread to the Lu tribe. The animals in the animal pen started to get restless. What happened? The Lu tribe guards looked over nervously. They didn't know what was going on. No one went out at night, right? No one. We don't go out at night. The Yanjiao people didn't go out either. That's good. Don't worry about it. Just guard your place. Don't worry about anything else, the leader said. Although he said that, the guards kept looking over at the forest from time to time. They wondered what was going on. Did the people hiding in the forest start fighting? Or did someone else come over? Ever since the incident happened, the Lu tribesmen had been under a lot of pressure. Every movement made them overthink. While the Lu tribe guards were distracted, not far from the animal pen where the dumb birds were kept, 3 figures took advantage of the fact that the moon was obscured by the clouds. They approached the animal pen. Although they were curious about what was going on in the forest, they knew that this was a good opportunity to make a move. While the noise attracted the guards, they would be able to make a move on the animal pen where the dumb birds were kept more smoothly. During this period of time, they had been working almost every day. They took turns. Today, it was one person, tomorrow it was another person. Tonight, it was the 3 of them. Even if the Yanjiao people came today and knew that the security here would be much tighter, they still couldn't help but feel greedy. These days, they had been living too well. They didn't care whether the Lu tribe's fire seed was extinguished or not. They were just used to coming over to lead a bird full of meat away when they were hungry and eating to their heart's content. Whenever they were hungry, they would come to the Lu tribe's animal pen. When they first came, they were a little more cautious. They were careful when they stole things to avoid the Lu tribesmen chasing after them. But later, they realized that more and more people were targeting the Lu tribe. The Lu tribesmen no longer went out. They just stayed in the tribe. Even if they heard provocations, they rarely went out. That was why they became bolder and bolder. They would even laugh out loud while eating and drinking. Some of them would even throw bones at the Lu tribesmen after eating and laugh at them. The Lu tribesmen were so angry that they stomped their feet. The Lu tribesmen didn't dare to come out. This was the consensus of everyone. They had nothing to fear. As for today, although they saw the Lu tribesmen coming to help, they still chose to come. They were hungry. It was just a test. It should be fine. They told themselves this in their hearts. At night, when the patrolling guards left, they approached the beast pens with familiarity. First, they observed their surroundings, but they didn't see anything different around the beast pens. The guards were still the same, and there wasn't anything different from before. Sure enough, it was all a bluff. One person laughed silently. He caught a fragrant fruit thrown by his companion behind him and tied it with a straw rope. Then, he cut a few holes on the fruit to let the juice flow out. When the wind blew, the fragrance of the fruit flew into the distance. In the direction the wind blew, they could vaguely see a bird's nest on a tree. There was only one bird in it. The other birds were a little further away. They were cautious. They knew that they couldn't attract too many stupid birds at once. Otherwise, they would be too big of a target and easily alert the guards of the Lu tribe. The few times they were discovered by the Lu tribesmen, it was because they attracted too many stupid birds at once. So they were discovered by the guards, and it took them a lot of effort to escape. So, since then, they learned to be smart. Every time, they would pick a bird that was a little further away from the flock and nested in a bird's nest alone. The person holding the fruit approached the fence of the animal pen and skillfully threw the fruit towards the blurry figure. The fruit was tied with a straw rope. It drew an arc in the air and stopped about 10 meters away from the bird's nest. Because the ground was covered with grass and the fruit was soft, it didn't make too much noise. Although stupid birds were stupid, they had a good sense of smell. They had already learned the technique of stealing birds. They knew the best distance and the fruit landed on the predicted landing spot. Tap tap tap. The sound of the bird's big toe stepping on the ground rang out. The person was happy. It's coming. Many times, even if they avoided more birds, the fragrance of the fruit might still attract 2 or 3 birds at once. They still had to spend a lot of effort to steal the birds out. However, this time, there was only one bird that was attracted by the fragrance of the fruit, and no more birds came over. That was even better. It saved them a lot of trouble. Judging from the sound, this bird was quite big. That made them even happier. He hid behind the fence. Because he couldn't see the situation inside, he could only judge by the sound. There was no one else. The patrolling guards didn't come. The bird had already stopped at the place where they threw the fruit. The person holding the straw rope felt the rope in his hand being pulled. He knew that the bird was about to eat, so he quickly pulled the rope out. But when pulling the rope, he had to be skillful. He couldn't be too fast. If he was too fast, the stupid bird wouldn't chase him at night. But if he was too slow, he would be eaten by the stupid bird. Thinking of this, the person was quite proud. One person concentrated on pulling the rope, listening to the sound and judging the behavior of the stupid bird. The other person was breaking the fence. Behind them, there were still people on guard to see if there were any patrolling guards from the Lu tribe. Hurry up! Someone behind urged. The 2 people who were squatting beside the fence were also anxious. The Lu tribe's guards were already here. The person pulling the rope sped up. After pulling for a while, he stopped. When he felt the rope was struggling, he continued pulling. The other person made a hole in the fence. Because these fences were often broken, the Lu tribe repaired them in a hurry. The trees they used now weren't very good, so the gaps between the logs were bigger. This made it easier for them to break the fences. They cut the ropes connecting the logs, pulled out the logs that could be pulled out, and sawed the ones that couldn't be pulled out. As long as they put something on the saw, the sound of sawing wood would be reduced a lot. The sound of a big toe stepping on the ground was getting closer. Judging by the sound, I know it's a big guy. Hee hee. The person sawing the log whispered. Actually, if they had more strength, wouldn't it be easier to just carry one out? Unfortunately, they didn't have the strength, so they could only try harder. The person pulling the rope didn't laugh. He always felt that today's bird was a little different from the previous ones. He stretched his neck and looked through the hole in the fence. He vaguely saw a bird's shadow. Although it was a little different from the previous ones, it wasn't as fat, but it shouldn't be a problem. They didn't see the Yanjiao team today. They only saw the tail of the team that had already entered the Lu tribe's territory, so they didn't think of anything else. Hurry up! The person behind them urged again. I know. Okay. Prepare the rope. Before the man could finish his sentence, he felt the straw rope in his hand being pulled inwards by a strong force. He was caught off guard and crashed into the fence that had not been pulled out yet, making a loud bang. "What's going on?" the person next to him who had just finished sawing wood asked. However, just as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly rushed out of the broken fence like a gust of wind. A foot with a big toe stomped down from top to bottom. "Ah!" a scream suddenly sounded. The stupid birds in the animal pen were shocked and gathered in the middle of the pen. After little Jingzi stepped on the man, it didn't give him any time to get up. Its 2 big feet stepped on him quickly, not giving him a chance to get up at all. This was the principle of taking the initiative and taking the opponent's life. It was always like this when hunting in the forest. Otherwise, how could it hunt down those beasts that were stronger than it? The clouds in the night sky moved, and the moon that was blocked by the wind showed up. The person who was pulled by the rope and bumped into the fence turned his head and saw his companion being stepped under the bird's claws. With the help of the moonlight, he saw the bird coming out of the animal pen. He only felt a chill run from his tailbone to his brain. This wasn't the kind of stupid bird that they usually ate. Its body was obviously similar to those stupid birds, but the 2 claws in front of him were much sharper and stronger. They were like hooks, and the skin would be torn off if they were hooked. "Quick, someone is stealing stupid birds again." The Lu tribe's patrolman heard the noise and ran over. When the person in the forest saw the situation change, he quickly ran towards the animal pen, wanting to pull his companion out. However, as soon as he ran out of the forest, he saw a big bird jump up in the dark. Its 2 big claws kicked one of his companions away. As for the other, he fell to the ground and struggled weakly, unable to get up at all. After seeing the situation over there, the person who ran out of the forest stopped and turned to run. The Lu tribe's people were already here, and the 2 men were injured. He definitely couldn't escape from the Lu tribe's pursuit with the injured. It was better to escape first. Chapter 768. When the patrolling guards rushed over, they only saw 2 heavily injured people. One of them had been hit by the bird's beak and immediately fell to the ground. They didn't know if he was dead or alive. After repairing the broken fence, the Lu tribesmen looked back a few times before they left. The giant bird that the flaming horns brought over had already returned to its nest. They were worried that this ferocious bird would harm the stupid birds in the animal pen, but now it seemed that not only was it harmless, it was also very beneficial. Didn't they just catch 2 bird thieves? Perhaps because they knew that the bird thieves had been caught, the other people in the forest didn't make any moves. The next day, the rested Yanjia warriors walked out of the Lu tribe. The Lu tribesmen had provided them with food, but Xiaofan and the others had also brought back a lot of meat jerky made from fearsome beast meat. Fearsome beast meat was still the most nutritious. They ate a little bit of all kinds of meat. Only when they were full would they have the strength to move. They didn't start immediately after eating. Xiaofan had told them about the plan. There would be a waiting period, during which they would adjust their bodies to their best condition. They wouldn't be affected by eating too much. The chief of the Lu tribe, Bai Xing, came out early in the morning. He was waiting to see how the Yanjia would deal with the people in the forest. Dian Fa and the 1,000 Masks remained in the Lu tribe. They didn't leave because they wanted to wait for the Lu tribesmen's final decision. They also wanted to see what the Yanjia would do next. Xiaofan stretched his arms and looked up at the sky. Cha-Cha had already scavenged for food and was circling in the air. Xiaofan whistled. He jumped onto Cha-Cha's back and flew up into the sky. Xiaofan's field of vision gradually widened. He could see the forest in the distance clearly. Taking a deep breath, Xiaofan shouted, "Everyone in the forest, listen up. Other than the Yanjiao tribesmen, all of you must leave before noon. Otherwise, we will kill you." His voice was like the roar of a fearsome beast. It swept through the forest and spread into the distance. In order to let the people inside understand, Xiaofan shouted in the tribal language and then in the language of the other side of the sea. Wuxia belonged to Yanjiao now, so Xiaofan wasn't wrong. His voice traveled far into the distance, and even the echo became weaker. In the forest, the people who heard Xiaofan's words had different reactions. Humph! How arrogant! Which tribe is the Yanjiao tribe? When is noon? Otherwise, I'll kill you. Can they kill us? Ah! At this time, in another part of the forest, Wuxia and the others were chatting with old acquaintances on the other side of the sea. When they heard this, they threw away the food in their hands and ran away. Brothers of Chonglu, why are you running? The person who had been bragging to Wuxia asked hurriedly when he saw the reaction of Wuxia and the others. If we don't run, we'll really die. Wuxia whistled. When the long-winged bird arrived, he and his companions flew out of the forest. They wanted to watch the show, but they had to avoid this troublesome place. They had to at least make sure they weren't affected. They didn't want the Yanjiao to misunderstand that they were involved in this matter. Actually, they weren't afraid of the other Yanjiao people. They were only afraid of Xiaofan, who had shouted just now. They felt pain all over when they heard his voice. They could still remember the slap in the air clearly. Seeing the Chonglis flee as if they had met their natural enemy, the people who had been mercilessly thrown aside by Wuxia were dumbfounded. When did the Chonglis become so afraid of trouble? One of them was puzzled. Didn't these Chonglis go wherever there was a show? Boss, what should we do? Another person turned to ask their leader, who was the one who had spoken to Wuxia just now. That person lowered his head and thought for a moment. Let's observe the situation first. If the situation doesn't look good, we'll retreat immediately. The Chonglis liked to watch a show, but they were also quick to avoid life-threatening dangers. Wuxia's group didn't seem to be faking it. While thinking, that person's brows furrowed slightly. They hadn't been on the mainland for long, so they didn't know much about the Yanjiao tribes. But now, they had to take this seriously. They came here to reap benefits, not to throw their lives away. After Xiaofan shouted, he landed and found a place to rest, leaving the Lu tribesmen to stare at him. You just shouted it out like that? It's fine. An elder of the Lu tribe whispered. Obviously, he didn't agree with this method. There had to be other ways to chase away those people in the forest. At the very least, it would be smarter to be discreet. The Yanjiao people were too reckless. DNFA also thought that these Yanjiao people were crazy. Did they think that this was Yanjiao territory? How long had those people been in the forest been here? He had already figured out everything in the forest. What about the Yanjiao people? They had just arrived and weren't familiar with the forest at all. One was in the dark while the other was in the light. It was obvious that the Yanjiao people were at a disadvantage. Yanjiao wanted to say something, but he stopped. He wanted to ask Xiaofan what his plan was. Should they reconsider and change their strategy? But Xiaofan closed his eyes and rested. The other Yanjiao people didn't seem to have any objections. In the end, he could only sigh. He was still worried. The sun in the sky gradually moved up, and the shadows cast by the people on the ground gradually shortened. Xiaofan opened his eyes and looked at the sun in the sky. He stood up and called out to the others. Let's go. The Yanjiao people who had been sharpening their swords for a long time were energized. They immediately followed Xiaofan out of the Lu tribe. At the border, the Lu tribesmen had already pulled open the wooden gate. They watched as the Yanjiao people walked out. They stared at the Yanjiao people who walked past them. They were curious as to whether these people would enter the forest just like that. The moment they stepped out of the Lu tribe's perimeter, the totemic power in Xiaofan's body surged like boiling water. It roared, and the totemic patterns appeared. Red flames emerged from the totemic patterns. Then, the people around Xiaofan and behind him also experienced the same change. The second, the third, the fifth, the 10th, 100, similar totemic patterns and flames appeared on their bodies. From afar, it looked like they were about to merge into one. It was as if someone had thrown a piece of firewood into a pot of oil. Flames erupted like a volcano, and their fighting spirit was ignited. A powerful aura suddenly rose and suppressed the surroundings. The fire seed's energy. The Lu shaman looked in that direction with a face full of shock. He had seen a similar scene at the Yanjiao's trading point. But seeing it again, he couldn't help but be shocked. This was the power of the fire seed. Even if the fire seed was no longer there, its energy still existed in the tribesmen. It followed the tribesmen everywhere, ready to start a prairie fire at any time. For Yanjiao, kill. As soon as the word kill was spoken, Xiaofan raised his foot and stomped it hard on the ground. There was a loud boom. The ground didn't crack, but it shook. The two large stones the Lu tribesmen placed at the gate of the perimeter wall were shaken off the ground. The Lu and 1,000 masks people who followed behind all felt their feet go numb. The stomping sound was like a war drum, announcing the start of this battle. For Yanjiao, kill. Close to 500 warriors roared in unison. Their voices were so loud that it seemed like they were going to overturn everything around them. Their murderous aura was so strong that it made the sun's temperature drop by a few degrees. It made people's hair stand on end. The energy of the Yanjiao fire seed instantly covered the entire area. It was so strong that the Lu tribesmen had the urge to retreat. Some of them even retreated, wanting to get as far away from the Yanjiao people as possible. These Yanjiao people were still eating and laughing together yesterday. But now, these Yanjiao people were in a terrifying state. They were like ferocious beasts with their fangs bared, ready to pounce. Bai Xing looked at the Yanjiao people and felt like he was hallucinating. It wasn't just 500 totemic warriors, but tens of thousands of them. It was as if the entire Yanjiao tribe had gathered here. It was so powerful. This. The shaman of the Lu tribe widened his eyes. His pupils dilated, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. What a strong fire seed. Even the fire seed in their fire pit seemed to be suppressed by it. Even if it was a battle spirit, it shouldn't be like this. The elders beside the Lu shaman gasped. Is it like this after merging with the fire seed? Aren't they only 500 people? Why is there such a strong fire seed energy? Xiaofan waved his hand and the team split into two groups. They ran in different directions like wolves and tigers. They knew where they were at a disadvantage. They weren't familiar with the terrain, but this wasn't a forest where fearsome beasts lived. They only needed to pay attention to the people hiding in the dark. Since they were in the open, then they had to be more direct. Weren't the people hiding in the forest familiar with the terrain? Weren't they able to hide in the dark? Fine, then let's chase those hiding in the dark out first. The two teams were like two knives on the rotating shaft of a meat grinder. They began to rotate in the forest. The people in the group were like fearsome beasts rushing forward. The ground under their feet trembled under their feet. They didn't seem to want to hide anything. The people in the forest felt the ground tremble closer and closer. Every sound was like a sudden clap of thunder, shocking them to the core. Some people who heard the shout in the morning and didn't leave were already regretting it. Leave? Or stay here? Maybe if they avoided the Yanjiao tribe's search, they would be fine. Many people thought so. However, they soon realized that they didn't understand the Yanjiao people. Boom! A tree trunk as thick as 5 people was brutally kicked by a Yanjiao warrior. Half of the tree was kicked away. The tree is down, let's see where you can hide. Change trees? Go ahead, let's see if you can escape faster or if we can surround you faster." The knives and axes in their hands flashed with cold light under the scattered light in the forest. The sharp edges of the knives and axes cut through the air, drawing a cruel cold light. "You damn Yinjiao people!" Before the heavy branches fell to the ground, several figures were forced to flee in different directions. Dozens of arrows pierced through the trees, whistling through the air as they chased after them. The warriors with knives, axes, hammers, spears, and other metal weapons followed closely. In this chase and encirclement, the division of labor was clear. One group was responsible for fighting, just like the wolves in the wolf pack who were responsible for chasing and intimidating the deer. The other group was responsible for attacking in the open. There was also a group of people who lowered their presence in the group at the beginning, but were secretly looking for opportunities to take their lives. Imitation was human nature and instinct. The ancestors of the tribesmen imitated the beasts in the forest to hunt. The predators in the forest had all sorts of ways to obtain food, and the tribesmen learned a lot from them. Then, they summarized, passed down, and improved. Even now, the Flaming Horn tribe was able to feed the entire tribe with just the things they paid in the Flaming River trading point, the crops in their fields, and the animals in their animal pens. However, they never stopped hunting. Because of this, they were able to maintain their peak condition and fight at their best. Bang! Bang! The sound of bowstrings vibrating could be heard. The arrows whistled through the air as they flew towards the forced-out targets. Some of the arrows were meant to chase or block, while others were full of killing intent. The arrows stabbed into the ground, splashing up countless pieces of grass and dust. Ruthlessness flashed in the eyes of the person who was forced out. He stomped his feet and gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. He turned around and slashed with his sword. The next moment, his sword collided with the saber that was shining like a cold star, creating sporadic sparks. At some point, he thought he was going to be sent flying. However, with a clang, the sword in his hand was cut in half. He didn't even have time to react. The knife that broke the sword didn't slow down and quickly slashed across his throat. Even though he reacted quickly and tried his best to dodge, he still couldn't avoid the killing intent of the knife. Pfft! Blood spurted out from his neck. The man holding the broken sword staggered 2 steps forward, his face still full of shock and fear. Xiaofan didn't look at that person again and continued forward. The other Yinjiao warriors also followed, the air currents from their movements pushing the people standing there to the ground. The fallen man looked at the bloody figures stepping over him and deeply regretted not leaving when he heard the shout in the morning. If he had left, he wouldn't have died here. His vision gradually darkened. He didn't have time to regret. Before he died, he thought that the other people who stayed in the forest would probably end up like him. If he could do it all over again, he would definitely run away as soon as he heard the words, Yinjiao. No amount of temptation was more important than his life. The blood-stained Yinjiao warriors didn't look at the fallen men, nor did they think about what they were thinking before they died. They continued to clear out the people hiding in the dark in the forest. The smell of blood in the forest became stronger and stronger, carried farther and farther by the wind. The people who thought they were lucky heard the sound getting closer and closer. Even their bones trembled. If they left now, wouldn't it be too late? In the distance, scavenger birds smelled the scent and flew over. On the Lu tribe side, the people standing on the outer wooden walls listened to the movements in the forest. They looked at the trees that were kicked into the air from time to time, and the muscles at the corners of their mouths twitched. In the past, when the Yinjiao tribe was still in the fearsome beast forest, Yanjiao often brought people with him to deliver baby beasts. However, he had never seen the Yinjiao people in battle. More accurately, he had never seen them in their hunting mode. Too cruel. The current chief of the Lu tribe, Bai Xing, looked over in a daze. An indescribable complex feeling arose in his mind. The shaman of the Lu tribe smelled the scent of blood carried by the wind and thought of the records left behind by their ancestors about the Yanjiao people. The Yanjiao people, no matter if it was 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years later, always liked to use similar methods. Simple and violent. Chapter 769. The forest flashed with cold light. The sounds of metal, people, branches breaking, and arrows flying through the air were mixed in with the smell of blood and carnage. Xiaofan raised his hand to wipe off the blood that splashed on his face and continued to walk forward. Suddenly, Xiaofan stopped in his tracks and the team slowed down. Xiaofan saw Wuxia standing beside a tree not far away. On their way here, they had seen a few people lying dead on the ground. Judging by the wounds on their bodies, it was easy to tell who killed them. Most of them had been killed with their bare hands, and the method was similar. There were also bits and pieces of gray linen in the surrounding bushes. Wuxia had many wounds on his body. If he was a normal person, he would have died many times over. However, Wuxia was still moving like a normal person. There was no pain on his face. When he saw Xiaofan and the rest, he even greeted them calmly. He must have gained a lot from last night. Xiaofan thought to himself. Xiaofan didn't stay here for long. He signaled the others to follow him and continue to sweep forward. The two teams moved in two different directions. Like the blades on the rotating shaft of a meat grinder, they cleaned up the forest around the Lu tribe from the inside to the outside. Wuxia wouldn't join them. After all, this operation focused on teamwork. Wuxia couldn't adapt to Yanjiao's operation. He didn't want to join them either. It seemed like he had another target. Moreover, from the looks of it, Wuxia was heading towards his target. Xiaofan didn't need to call him along. After Xiaofan and the rest left, Wuxia looked up at Yangguang. At this time, the Yangguang was not as strong as before. It was closer to dusk. Wuxia's cloak was mostly destroyed, and it hung on his body in tatters. Wuxia didn't mind it at all. He sniffed the air, and he could tell that there was a faint scent of blood in the air. The source of the scent was the target he was looking for. Wuxia didn't know why he could accurately identify the smell he was looking for. Perhaps the changes in his organs caused a change in his sense of smell. Moreover, the way he identified the smell of blood wasn't from the wind. It was from another smell in the blood that didn't spread with the wind. Perhaps it was a unique smell in the blood of people who had merged with the fire seed. It was different from that of normal beasts. Even though the people were downwind and the wind carried away the smell, Wuxia could still tell. After waking up from his long sleep, he was extremely sensitive to the smell of blood. There were no bloodstains on the ground. They covered it well. They also took into consideration the direction of the wind, but it still couldn't escape Wuxia's nose. Perhaps they didn't know that other than the smell of blood, there was another smell in their blood that couldn't be affected by the wind. Behind a bush as tall as a person clutched his abdomen. He breathed carefully and looked around nervously. His eyes were full of fear. He was at his limit. Fortunately, they were quite far from the Lu tribe. The Yanjiao team shouldn't be here. They had been active in the area around the Lu tribe for a long time. They were familiar with the area. They escaped quickly and left the people behind them behind. Did they escape death? His heart was filled with apprehension and regret. He didn't expect the 5 of them to lose so badly against one person last night. He couldn't help but tremble at the thought of that person. No, that person wasn't human. He definitely wasn't human. Otherwise, why couldn't they kill him? Luckily, he escaped quickly. Otherwise, he would have died like his 4 companions. As he was thinking, he suddenly heard rustling sounds approaching. It sounded like someone was running on the grass. Who was it? He didn't want to run. He felt that the temporary hiding place he had found was pretty good. As long as he continued to hide, he would be fine. Therefore, he only turned his head to look through the narrow gaps between the branches and leaves of the bushes to see who was coming. A figure covered in green appeared in his vision. He was so shocked that he almost stopped breathing. His blood seemed to freeze. How did this person catch up? Run! He thought, but his body was a step too late. An arm came straight at him like a spear. The next moment, he felt like his jaw was hit by a hammer. His whole body was lifted high into the air. His face contorted from the pain and broken bones. After landing heavily on the ground, he wanted to speak. He wanted to answer the question that they had ignored and didn't answer. He wanted this person to let him go, but the bones in his jaw were severely fractured. It was difficult for him to even open his mouth, let alone say a clear and complete sentence. Looking at the person walking over step by step, he used his arm to support himself. He wanted to run away again, but this time, he didn't have the chance. A hand pressed down on his head, forcing him back to the ground again. Bam! His head hit the ground, causing grass and mud to splatter in all directions. He was already seriously injured, so he couldn't withstand the impact. His mind was in a mess. Crack! There was the sound of bones breaking. The person on the ground stopped breathing. Wuxia retracted his hand from the person's head. When he got up, he was still confused. Why did these people look down on tribesmen? It had nothing to do with their strength. After all, these people weren't that strong. Wuxia didn't understand. Why did these people feel so superior when they no longer lived as tribesmen? Although these people didn't answer Wuxia's question directly, their reactions and words were filled with disdain. It wasn't just these 5 people. There were others too. These people from the other side of the sea made Wuxia unhappy when they talked about tribesmen. When he was in a bad mood, he didn't hold back. Weren't these people tribesmen too? Even if their way of life had changed, they shouldn't be so disdainful. Did the fire seed change, or did the people change? Wuxia maintained his posture and started to think. No, the fire seed was still the fire seed. It was just that the people had changed. Just like himself. Wuxia rubbed his fingers. The blood on his hand was still warm. It was much warmer than the blood on his body. That was because Wuxia didn't have any body temperature. Wuxia didn't look at the person on the ground. He glanced at the trees in front of him. He wanted to walk over, but after looking at the sky, he turned and walked back to the Lu tribe. He was hungry. When he saw the blood, he felt hungry. He even wondered if he should use the man's blood to alleviate his hunger. However, this was just a thought. He didn't actually do it. He wasn't interested in drinking human blood for now. After Wuxia left, a few figures walked out from the bushes in the direction he was looking at. Their faces were pale and they were frightened. They came from a mid-sized tribe in the central region. After merging with the fire seed, the people in the tribe were like wild horses out of control. All kinds of thoughts started to form in their minds. After hearing about the Lu tribe situation, they came over to take advantage of the situation. Who knew that they would almost lose their lives before they could take advantage of the situation? They didn't come out when Xiaofan shouted in the morning. They only came out when they heard the Flaming Horn tribe's frightening movements. They thought they had already left the warning area, but when they heard the commotion, they decided to come over and take a look. They thought they might be able to pick up some treasures, but who knew they would meet such a terrifying person? They believed that the person they were looking for must have noticed them. He just didn't care about them for some reason. At this moment, they felt extremely lucky. When dusk fell, the 2 teams of Yanjiao walked out of the forest covered in blood. They had been killing non-stop for half a day. They were exhausted physically and mentally. Their nerves were also tense. They were in their peak state when they were hunting in the forest. They felt like they were on fire. Even though it was over, they still couldn't calm down. However, even though they were still excited, their bodies were still exhausted. Even if their bodies were made of iron, they would still get tired. They weren't Wuxia, so they were about the same. But even if they were tired, they couldn't stop the strong murderous aura and the smell of blood from their bodies. Every pore on their bodies exuded a strong murderous aura. It made them look like ferocious beasts. Anyone who looked at them would feel a chill run down their spine. Even people who were used to seeing blood and death couldn't help but avoid them at this moment. When the Lu tribesmen saw the Yanjiao people coming over, they immediately opened up a path. They were nervous when they were more than 5 steps away from the team. After coming out of the forest, the people in the team felt much more relaxed. They even put their arms around each other's shoulders and laughed. It was just like when they were returning from a hunt. The injured had already been sent to the Lu tribe for treatment. They brought their own medicine. The medicine in the Lu tribe wasn't any better than the Yanjiao medicine. Bai Xing was just about to go up and say something to Xiaofan when his gaze swept past the Yanjiao team. He looked at the back of the team and asked, "Hey, who's that?" Xiaofan turned his head and smiled. "It's Wuxia, the one who was with us before." He was wearing a cloak. The Lu tribesmen were shocked. Was this the person who was stabbed with a sword but was fine? Yesterday, Wuxia was wearing a cloak and a hood so they couldn't see his face clearly. Also, he wasn't here last night so they didn't know what he looked like. Now that he wasn't wearing a cloak, they could see his face clearly. But after they saw him clearly, they were even more shocked. Wuxia's original appearance was only slightly greener than a normal person's. There wasn't anything special about him. But now, when Wuxia came out of the forest, the wounds on his body were exposed to everyone. Wuxia didn't look strong. At least compared to the Yanjiao people, Wuxia looked thin and weak. His cloak was tattered from the fight in the forest and it couldn't cover the wounds on his body. At this moment, there were countless wounds on Wuxia's body. His chest, back, limbs, neck, and even his face were all healed. Some of the wounds were only scars left. They were of different lengths and densely packed together. It was a shocking sight. Some people were impressed. Wuxia was indeed a brave warrior with such terrifying injuries. It wasn't hard to imagine the danger he faced in the forest. But there were also some people who saw something else. Because they saw it, they were even more shocked. They looked at Wuxia with respect and fear. More than half of those wounds would have been life-threatening if they were on a normal person. It would be a miracle if they were still alive. But there were also some wounds that were truly fatal. For example, the most obvious ones were around his heart, neck, and other places. Just by looking at the wounds, one could roughly estimate the depth of the wounds. Cuts, stabs, and other wounds would have been fatal if they were on a normal person. But Wuxia was just like yesterday. He was completely fine. His face was calm and he didn't look like he was injured at all. Jian Fa looked at Wuxia in shock. This person was even more dangerous than the Yanjiao people. Where did the Yanjiao people find someone like him? Why did he join the Yanjiao people? Elder Xiaofan, the people in the forest. Bai Xing asked. There shouldn't be any problems around here. Unless someone is hiding and hasn't been found by us, Xiaofan looked around the forest. Flocks of scavenger birds were already moving around in the forest. Thank you. Bai Xing said solemnly. The promised reward will be sent tomorrow. Okay. Since it was a deal, he had to take what he had to take. Xiaofan thought of something and said, "We'll leave once you're done dividing the reared beasts." Hearing this, Bai Xing paused in his actions and remained silent. We've already done what we have to do. We won't stay here forever. We won't interfere with your decisions. But if you want to move and merge your fire seed, these 2 days are the best time to do so. The threats around them had been dealt with. Those who had gone into hiding wouldn't come back anytime soon. This was a good opportunity. If they missed it, they wouldn't have another chance. They couldn't have too many distractions when merging their fire seed. I understand. Bai Xing gritted his teeth. He had already made up his mind. Seeing Bai Xing leave with heavy but determined steps, Guang Yi asked Xiaoxian, "Can the Lu tribesmen merge their fire seed?" "Yes. But I don't know where they'll move to." "They won't stay here any longer," Xiaoxian deduced from what he heard from the Lu tribesmen. The Thousand Masks tribe was still waiting. This meant that the Lu tribesmen didn't have a consensus. This isn't good. Guang Yi frowned. He didn't like this attitude of the Lu tribesmen and didn't expect them to move to the Flaming River region. Then we'll have to see how they perform. After this incident, if they still couldn't find the root of the problem, the Lu tribe might be able to get through this, but they might not be able to survive the next time, even if they merged their fire seed. After checking on the injured again, Xiaoxian assigned them to take turns to keep watch. Then, he asked Guang to bring the forest raccoons back to the animal pens. Although they had cleared out a group of people in the forest, they couldn't be sure if anyone else would dare to come and steal the birds. That night, the Yanjiao people slept well. However, the Thousand Masks and Lu tribesmen suffered from insomnia. Chapter 770. The next day, the Lu tribesmen still hadn't finished counting the animals in their animal pens, so Bai Xing went to look for Xiaoxian. "We've decided to merge our fire seed, and after that, we'll be moving to the Flaming River. We hope that Elder Xiaoxian and the rest of you can help us on this journey." Bai Xing didn't sleep the entire night, so he didn't look well. However, his eyes were bright and he sounded relaxed as he spoke. They finally made a decision on such a huge matter. Xiaoxian looked at the new chief of the Lu tribe. He didn't mind when the reared beasts would be given to him. If the Lu tribe decided to move to the Flaming River region, they wouldn't have to give him the reared beasts now. After everything had settled down and the reared beasts had recovered, it wouldn't be too late to send them to the Flaming Horns. However, Xiaoxian still had a question. "Where have you decided to move to?" "The Flaming River region isn't small," Xiaoxian asked. "Well, we've already decided on the location a long time ago," Bai Xing smiled. "The chief brought us there during the Flaming River Trading Point's grand banquet." The chief Bai Xing was referring to was the previous chief who had passed away. Although that chief wasn't the strongest in the tribe, he was smart and had foresight. When he was invited to the Flaming River Trading Point, he brought a few warriors to explore the area. He even drew a map and made markings on it. The Lu tribe's water source was almost depleted. Although they could still survive, a lack of water severely affected the quality of their animals. Back then, when the previous chief went to the Flaming River Trading Point, he had already considered moving there. After he came back, he went to a few other places and listed them as options. Now, Bai Xing had chosen the Flaming River Trading Point. Xiaoxian looked at the animal skin scroll Bai Xing took out. On it was a map of the Flaming River Trading Point with a few simple strokes. It marked out the Flaming River Trading Point's location, the Rain Tribe, Drumming Tribe and other tribes. The place the Lu tribesmen chose was upstream of the Rain Tribe. It wasn't too close to the Flaming River, but it wasn't too far either. Most importantly, there was a small river that led to the Flaming River. Xiaoxian knew this river because he had walked upstream. This river must have appeared during the disaster and didn't exist before. It was only about 10 meters wide and less than 20 meters wide, but it was enough for the Lu tribesmen. Plus, it was connected to the Flaming River, so it wouldn't dry up easily. Even if they ran out of water, they could walk further to the Flaming River to get more water. Even worse, if there was a bigger problem, they could choose to move. After merging their fire seed, they wouldn't have to worry about it. When are you merging? Asked Xiaoxian. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow at the latest, said Bai Xing. The Lu shaman asked Xiaoxian for advice about merging their fire seed. Although they had gained a lot of experience from merging their fire seed, they still had to be careful when it came to their fire seed. In the end, the Lu tribe chose to merge their fire seed on the afternoon of the third day after clearing the forest. They didn't dare to do it at night because the animals in their animal pens would be frightened. They were braver during the day, so they were safer. Dian Fa had already left with the 1,000 Masks tribe the day before. No one knew what they were planning in the future. Perhaps they would imitate the slave masters on the other side of the sea and merge with other smaller tribes to form their own political system. No matter what, they had to go through a bloody and cruel cleansing process. After all, the situation there wasn't like the Flaming River region. The 1,000 Masks tribe was surrounded by tribes that had once established themselves in the central region. Every tribe had their own ambitions. If they weren't careful, the 1,000 Masks tribe could be bitten back. Back in the day, the Ji family in the royal city fought with a few other tribes for the top position. It was also a bloodbath. However, that was the 1,000 Masks tribe's business. Xiaoxian didn't think about it anymore. He stood with the other Yanjiao tribesmen outside the Lu tribe's boundary. During the merging process, the Lu tribe's fire seed energy would affect the Yanjiao tribesmen. The conflict between different fire seeds would bring pressure. This was the Lu tribe's territory. During the merging process, the fire seed energy would be released completely. The Yanjiao tribesmen didn't want to get hurt. The aura of the Lu tribe's fire seed was getting stronger and stronger. The people standing outside the walls could clearly feel the pressure from the foreign tribe's fire seed. It was rare for Wuxia to experience something like this, so he looked at the Lu tribe curiously. Is this the merging process? It's just part of the process. We need to ignite the fire seed in the fire pit. This is just the beginning. The fire seed energy will get stronger and stronger, Xiaoxian explained. Wuxia had a familiar feeling. It wasn't the Lu tribe's fire seed energy, but the process of merging with the fire seed. Although he wasn't a Lu tribesman, he could feel the current state of the Lu tribe's fire seed. It was very similar to the scene in his memory. Back then, they encountered a similar situation. Unfortunately, after the fire seed was ignited, the shaman limited it to only 10 of them. Including the shaman, there were 11 people in total. 11 people merged with the fire seed of the entire Han tribe. If it wasn't for the fact that the fire seed was weakened during the battle, the 11 of them would have died on the spot. Back then, the shaman of the Han tribe didn't expect that to happen either. When he realized that things were out of control, he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't do anything about it and could only let it happen. Even now, no one could recreate what happened to the Han tribe. It was just an accident that no one knew about. Even if the shaman of the Han tribe was still alive, he couldn't recreate it. When the khaki-colored fire seed flames shot up into the sky, the energy of the fire seed reached its peak. The majestic energy brought great pressure to the Yanjiao people standing outside. The Lu tribe was like the eye of a storm, with strong winds blowing outwards. Guang Yi couldn't help but take a few steps back. He wanted to get as far away from the fire seed as possible. When he looked up, he saw Xiaoxian standing there calmly as if nothing had happened. He thought for a moment, then took a step back and stood behind Xiaoxian. Instantly, he felt the pressure lessen. It was as if the impact of the Lu tribe's fire seed was blocked by Xiaoxian. When the others saw Guang Yi doing this, they followed suit. 1, 2, 10, 100. When Xiaoxian looked behind him, the scattered Yanjiao people had formed a triangular formation. Xiaoxian was at the front of the triangle facing the Lu tribe. Wuxia didn't stand behind Xiaoxian like the others. Although he was also affected by the Lu tribe's fire seed, this feeling was hard to describe. If it was a normal person, they would definitely say that it was like they couldn't breathe. Wuxia didn't need to breathe anymore, but this feeling was similar. However, while the Yanjiao people wanted him to relax, Wuxia didn't want to. He wanted to experience the changes more clearly because all of this matched up with the scenes in his memory. It really is fusion. Wuxia closed his eyes. Back then, the shaman of the Han tribe almost let his injuries worsen. It was equivalent to suicide. If they had known this would happen, perhaps the shamaness wouldn't have blamed herself so much. No, she still blamed herself. After all, it was the shamaness who turned the tribe's fire seed into such a state. Moreover, she only merged it into 11 people's bodies. The rest of the Han tribesmen were no different from the wanderers who had no totemic power. No matter what, it was all in the past. What happened couldn't be undone. There was no point in regretting it. When everything calmed down, the Lu tribe's fire seed's aura gradually dissipated. The Yanjiao people also felt the pressure on their bodies disappear. It's done. The Lu tribesmen had successfully merged their fire seed. Every tribe that succeeded in merging their fire seed would have some time to adjust their mentality. Everyone had different thoughts. After all, from now on, they were no longer the Lu tribe of the past. If they encountered danger, they wouldn't be able to avoid it by hiding in the tribe. They wouldn't have the fire seed to protect them anymore. However, Xiaofan and the others wouldn't give the Lu tribe too much time to adjust. They couldn't just sit here and wait for the Lu tribe to adapt to this change. The Lu tribe still had to migrate. If they wanted to travel with the Yanjiao people, they had to hurry up and prepare. The animals in the animal pens were counted and assigned to different people. When the time came, there would be people to watch the animals along the way to prevent them from leaving the herd. Fortunately, after generations of domestication, the animals had become much more docile. They weren't as wild as the wild beasts in the forest. There were even some animals like cows and horses that were used to pull carts. When the time came, as long as they took good care of them, they would be able to manage the herd. The animals in the Lu tribe were all social animals. Wherever the herd went, they would follow. The Lu tribe was busy for 3 days. The Yanjiao people also helped them build carts. The people who hadn't awakened their totemic power and the injured were arranged to sit on the wooden carts. When everything was ready, the Lu tribesmen set a fire and burned down all the houses in the tribe. The houses and other tools that they couldn't take away were gone. Without the ancient fire seed, as soon as they left, someone would come and take it. They wouldn't leave it to those who were still watching in the dark. Since they couldn't take it away, they might as well destroy it. When everything was destroyed in the fire, the Lu tribe drove the herd away and began to migrate. There were people sitting on the stupid birds in front of the herd. Sometimes, some injured Yanjiao warriors would ride on them. Because these birds were too stupid, they wouldn't think of anything else when they saw food. So, if you wanted these stupid birds to follow you, you just had to use food to keep them. Thus, such a scene was often seen on the road. A clumsy bird was striding with its 2 big feet, and the person riding on it was holding a long pole, with a piece of wild fruit tied to the other end of the pole, hanging in front of them. The cows and other herds of animals were also divided into several groups. There were people riding horses and cows around the herds. They ran back and forth, chasing the animals that strayed away from the herd back to the herd. When other tribes migrated, there were only people. However, when the Lu tribe migrated, it was even bigger. The running hooves of the animals kicked up clouds of dust. It was fine in places with a lot of grass, but in places with sparse vegetation and people walking around, the clouds of dust were so thick that people couldn't even see them clearly. The Lu tribe's migration route was different from the Yanjiao's. Sometimes, they would take longer detours for safety reasons. Xiaofan sent letters to the major tribes in the central region in advance, telling them to take care of their subordinates. This gave the major tribes a headache. Especially the Thousand Masks tribe. When they saw Xiaoxian's letter, Jianfa cursed the Yanjiao ancestors in his heart. The Lu tribe chose to follow the Yanjiao and the Thousand Masks tribe couldn't stop them. But now, the Lu tribe's migration team might be attacked by other tribes. What did this have to do with the Thousand Masks tribe? Even if some of the other tribes relied on the Thousand Masks tribe, that was their own decision. Why should the Thousand Masks tribe stop them? Jianfa had hoped that the Lu tribe would encounter more trouble during their migration. That way, they would regret following the Yanjiao. But now, the letter said that if any of the Thousand Masks tribe's subordinates attacked the migration team, the Thousand Masks tribe would be held responsible. How unreasonable. However, because of the merging of the Fire Seed, the Thousand Masks tribe had signed a treaty with the Flaming Horn tribe at the Flaming River trading point. Now that Xiaoxian mentioned this in his letter, even if the Thousand Masks tribe was unhappy, they had to endure it. The chief of the Thousand Masks tribe closed his eyes and didn't speak. In the end, he took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Tell the other tribes not to attack the Lu tribe's migration team. If anyone dares to attack them, they will be kicked out of Thousand Masks territory." If the Yanjiao people made the Thousand Masks tribe suffer, the Thousand Masks tribe could only vent their anger on others. Jianfa's lips moved. No one knew what he was saying, but he still turned around and followed the chief's orders to pass the message to the Thousand Masks tribe's subordinates. Not only the Thousand Masks tribe, but other tribes, such as the Mang tribe and the Eight Limbs tribe, also warned their subordinates after receiving Xiaoxian's letter. Therefore, although the migration team of the Lu tribe also encountered some trouble, it was not much. At least, it was less than they expected. At first, Yan Jiao thought it was strange. Why did the people they met along the way not come over to snatch the beasts when they saw them? During their break, he chatted with the Yanjiao people and found out that Xiaoxian had sent letters to the other tribes. The elders of the Lu tribe who were against following the Yanjiao people were shocked and they heard about this. They didn't expect things to turn out this way. After all, these tribes were all big tribes in the central region. How could they restrict the movements of other tribes just because of Xiaoxian's letter? Wuxia ran at a constant speed. Some of the Lu tribesmen told him to rest on the back of a dumb bird if he was tired, but the moment Wuxia got on the back of a bird, the dumb birds would crouch down and curl up into a ball. They wouldn't run away unless Wuxia left. They were afraid. Wuxia didn't mind. He didn't get tired easily. As he ran, Wuxia, who was wearing a new cloak, suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction. His expressionless face twitched. Chapter 771. After the Lu tribe's migration team left the central region, the number of people they encountered gradually decreased. Originally, the people of the Lu tribe thought that they would encounter more obstacles when they were in the central region. But who would have thought that the places they passed through would be less troublesome? Although they did encounter a lot of small troubles along the way, such as being attacked by some people who were not from the central region, they passed through smoothly. However, after leaving the central region, when the tribes were not so densely distributed, they might encounter more troubles. In the central region, there were many people and many eyes. Perhaps some people wanted to hide their identities and attack the Lu tribesmen, but there were too many people in the central region. If they were accidentally discovered by others and recognized the person in the dark, then the person who attacked them would be unlucky. But when there were fewer people, no one would be able to see what they were doing. Even if the Lu tribesmen wanted to find help, they couldn't. Therefore, after leaving the central region, they had to be more vigilant. At night, the team gathered to rest. Xiaoxian had a bad feeling. After thinking for a while, he took out a straw rope and began to perform divination. The Yanjiao people were surprised to see Xiaoxian like this. Xiaoxian wouldn't use this method for small matters. It wasn't good to rely on it too much. What if the divination didn't work in the future? How could they survive? That was why, as long as it was something that could be easily solved, Xiaoxian would not use divination. The Yanjiao people also knew this. Because of this, they were curious why Xiaoxian was performing divination again. Did he have a premonition? After the knot was successfully tied, Xiaoxian frowned and pondered. The others didn't ask. Xiaoxian would naturally tell them when he figured it out. However, they were still curious about what Xiaoxian had divined. It didn't look good. Could it be that someone wanted to rob them? The divination didn't look good either. Xiaoxian looked in a direction. It was the direction of the desert. The premonition he had was related to the desert. Not divination couldn't accurately predict what was going to happen. There were too many variables. Xiaoxian couldn't predict what was going to happen, but he was sure that there was danger coming from that direction. The target was clear too. As he thought about it, Xiaoxian looked in Ganqia's direction. This time, the target wasn't the Lu tribe or the Yanjiao people. It was Ganqia. The sun couldn't be seen now. There was only a little light from the clouds. Ganqia didn't wear his hood, revealing his bald head. Xiaoxian didn't think that Ganqia's actions. Guang Yi, you and Xiang Chen will leave with the team tomorrow, said Xiaoxian to Guang Yi, who was resting. Guang Yi frowned deeply. Something's going to happen. They're not targeting the Lu tribe. Xiaoxian pointed in the direction of the desert. There might be people coming from there. You guys leave first. Guang Yi couldn't see faces, but he had a good sense of direction. He could tell where Xiaoxian was pointing. He wanted to ask them to stay and help, but he remembered the undead monsters in the desert. He paused and asked, "Just you? Don't you need more people to stay here?" "He'll definitely stay." Xiaoxian tilted his head in Ganqia's direction. Their target might be Ganqia. Those people's target was Ganqia and not Xiaoxian. Guang Yi was relieved. From his perspective, Ganqia wasn't a member of his tribe. He didn't care if anything happened to him. Xiaoxian, on the other hand, could run if he couldn't win. Cha-Cha could follow him. It was much easier to fly in the air. It would be more inconvenient to leave more people behind. Since Xiaoxian had already made his decision, it must have been a decision after careful consideration. Guang Yi did not say anything else. The next day, after a night of rest, the team set off again. This time, Guang Yi and Xiang Chen were in the lead. They would bring their people and travel with the Lu tribe to the Flaming River. With them around, Xiaoxian wouldn't have to worry. Many people in the Lu tribe were confused when they saw Xiaoxian and Ganqia staying behind. However, the Yanjiao didn't say anything. They didn't ask any further questions. The only thing they knew was that Xiaoxian stayed behind to stop some trouble. The cries of the reared beasts gradually faded into the distance. The team could no longer be seen. Xiaoxian found a tree nearby and sat down to rest, waiting for the people to arrive. Those people must have a way to track them. When Robber 11 went to the secret underground room in the Flaming River Castle, he brought along special tracking insects. The people from Rock Hill City had many tricks up their sleeves, so they must have a way to find their targets. This place was surrounded by forests. They weren't dense and the trees weren't very big. Perhaps it was because there were occasional people here, but there weren't any thick, ancient trees. There were mountains nearby. They weren't tall and were considered big in this area. However, they couldn't be compared to the forests where fearsome beasts lived. The surroundings were green and there was still some dew on the grass in the morning. Xiaoxian rested on the tree and waited. As long as they didn't move, those people would definitely find them. Even if they didn't arrive today, they would definitely arrive tomorrow. The Yanjiao and Lu tribes' teams were already far away. No matter how big the commotion here was, it wouldn't affect them. Gan Xie sat on a large rock under the shade of a tree. A long time ago, a team used to rest here. There were some drawings carved on the rock with hard tools, but they were already blurred so he couldn't tell what was written. The hood covered most of Gan Xie's face, so his eyes couldn't be seen clearly. He just stared in one direction for a long time. He didn't even blink once. He was like a stone statue, maintaining the same posture without moving. This wasn't something a normal person could do. The sun hung high in the sky and set. The clouds in the sky were burning and the ground seemed to be covered in a layer of red. An eagle screeched in the sky. Xiaofan stood up and looked in a certain direction. They're here. Not long after, 4 flying birds appeared in the distant sky. When the figures in the air flew closer, Xiaofan also recognized these birds. They were the species domesticated by the desert slave masters, a type of eagle that lived in the desert. Compared to eagles in other places, their claws were larger in proportion to their bodies. Every toe was longer and harder. When they found prey in the desert, even if the prey burrowed into the sand, they could dive down and dig their long sharp claws into the sand to fish out the prey. Many desert snakes, scorpions and lizards were the prey of these desert eagles. There weren't many people coming. Of the 4 eagles, 3 had one person standing on them. The leading eagle had 2 people on its back. There were 5 people in total. Xiaofan became even more cautious. The fewer people there were, the harder it would be to deal with them. Xiaofan recognized the 2 people on the leading desert eagle. It was Su Lu, whom he had met in the desert, and the cloaked man who controlled the puppets beside Su Lu. There was only one person on each of the other 3 eagles. Su Lu and the person beside him were sprawled on the eagle's back. The other 3 were standing, and they stood very steadily. They were dressed like the strange puppets, but Xiaofan knew that these 3 people were different from the puppets he encountered in the desert. Before the 3 desert eagles landed, the 3 people had already jumped off their backs and fell. Bang bang bang. The sound of 3 people landing on the ground shook the ground. It was like the muffled sound of boulders crashing onto the ground. There was a thick layer of grass on the ground, so there wasn't a lot of dust. After the 3 people landed, they didn't move. Instead, they stood in the crater. Because their faces were covered with cloth, Xiaofan couldn't see what they looked like. However, through his special vision, he could see that their bones were brighter than normal people's. They didn't breathe, nor did they have a heartbeat. They didn't even pant after landing. They were like lifeless pieces of wood. Puppets. They were special puppets. Xiaofan looked at Gan Xie. These 3 people were very similar to Gan Xie. Perhaps they were Gan Xie's clansmen who had been turned into puppets. Unlike Gan Xie, these 3 people had traces of red energy flowing through their bones. This was the energy source that controlled their movements. It was also the power of the fire seed that had been implanted into their bodies. Someone had implanted the power of the fire seed into their bones to control them. The person beside Su Lu couldn't have done this. Otherwise, Gan Xie would have been turned into a puppet long ago. However, Xiaofan didn't sense anyone else around. Where was the person controlling these 3 people? Or did they not need someone to control them? Xiaofan's heart skipped a beat. The puppets he had seen in the desert could only be considered high-level puppets. However, these 3 people might be even more special. As Xiaofan pondered, the eagle that Su Lu and the person beside him were on had landed. They weren't like the 3 puppets who couldn't even feel pain. They wouldn't fall from the sky. Instead, they waited for the desert eagle to stabilize itself before coming down. After Su Lu steadied himself, he looked around. His gaze lingered on Gan Xie, who was sitting on a large rock. Then, he looked at Xiaofan, who had already come down from the tree. Yanjiao, Xiaofan. Su Lu shouted angrily. Su Lu was so angry that his liver hurt when he recalled Su Gu's gloating expression after he had abandoned his armor and escaped with his body covered in wounds. The Luoya city king was very disappointed in him. He had also thought of finding the ancient corpse. He didn't hesitate to use his treasures to contact the thief and ask him to go to the Yanjiao tribe to find the lost ancient corpse. Unfortunately, there was no news of the thief. The thief said that he was already dead. Fortunately, he still had one more chance. As long as he brought back the lost ancient corpse, he still had a chance to compete with Su Gu. Su Li's eyes were filled with murderous intent when he thought of the culprit who had caused all this. However, when he thought of Xiaoxian's strength, he became wary. Fortunately, he didn't have to fight this time. Otherwise, even 10 of him wouldn't be a match for Xiaoxian. Chu Su. Su Lu looked at the person standing beside him. The person wearing a yellow sackcloth cloak didn't pay attention to Su Lu. His gaze was fixed on Wuxia. Before he landed, he knew that the person sitting there was the person he was looking for. However, he couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. He looked at the exposed half of the person's face and the pair of pale hands. His heart skipped a beat. He looked at Xiaoxian abruptly and asked, "What did you do?" Xiaoxian smiled and didn't say anything. Chu Su's cloak was still covered in sand. The wind that blew against him still carried the smell of the desert. It didn't fit in with the surrounding atmosphere. Chu Su looked at the person who was sitting on the rock and wearing a cloak. The gray and rough sackcloth was fluttering in the wind. He was also wearing a cloak, but compared to the 3 people they brought with them, he looked more like a normal person. If it weren't for the fact that the person wasn't breathing and that the tracking device in his hand was pointing in the same direction, he would have doubted his own judgment. What did the Yanjiao people do with the ancient corpse? Why would there be such a huge change? Why are you asking so many questions? Su Lu became impatient when Chu Su didn't move. Xiaoxian, hand the ancient corpse over to us and we'll let you go this time. With 3 powerful helpers by his side, Su Lu was confident in his words. Xiaoxian chuckled. Xiaoxian's nonchalant attitude infuriated Su Lu. Xiaoxian's gaze and tone were obviously looking down on him. Su Lu recalled that he had suffered a few losses at the hands of Xiaoxian. He took a deep breath and said, "Cut the crap. Just kill him." The last sentence was directed at Chu Su. As long as they killed Xiaoxian, they would be able to take the ancient corpse away. Originally, he didn't want to fight Xiaoxian here. If he accidentally lost his life, it wouldn't be worth it. However, with Xiaoxian's attitude, Su Lu didn't want to give up so easily. His father, the Luoya king, had said that these 3 puppets were different from ordinary puppets. Perhaps they wouldn't have a problem facing Xiaoxian's strange flaming blade? Su Li's expression turned cold when he thought of this. Chu Su, what are you waiting for? Do it. The cloaked man beside him still ignored Su Lu because he noticed that the cloaked man had glanced at him. Under the shadow of the cloaked man's hood, there was a pair of eyes looking back at him. Chu Su suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and said to Xiaoxian again, "Ask him to come here. We want to bring him back to Rock Hill City." Xiaoxian didn't move. "I don't care. Why don't you talk to him personally and see what he thinks? If he wants to go, I won't stop him." What did he mean? Su Lu and Chu Su were puzzled. Then, they heard the person sitting on the rock say, "Who are you?" His tone was cold and emotionless. He spoke. Su Lu felt his scalp go numb and his back felt like it was stuffed with ice. "Isn't this an ancient corpse? How can it speak?" Chu Su was horrified. The Yanjiao people had brought an ancient corpse out. Judging by the looks of it, he guessed that the Yanjiao people had used some means to turn the ancient corpse into something like a puppet. However, a puppet couldn't speak on its own because it was inanimate. But, what was this person sitting on the rock not far away from them? He had placed the ancient corpse under the beast carriage for a long time. He should have been familiar with it. But why did it feel like a complete stranger? He must have been controlled by the Yanjiao people. Chu Su, do it. Su Li's voice was sharp and piercing due to his extreme shock. This time, Chu Su didn't wait any longer. If they wanted to know what had happened to the ancient corpse, they would know with a single look. Do it! Chu Su shouted. As soon as Chu Su's voice fell, the three cloaked men standing in the pit charged towards Wuxia like arrows released from a bow. Feeling the hostility, Wuxia felt an indescribable sense of loss. His entire body tensed up. His body, which had no temperature to begin with, seemed to be emitting cold air. The temperature around him seemed to be dropping as well. They were his tribesmen. Wuxia had already sensed them before they had even appeared. Now, he could feel the murderous aura emanating from the three tribesmen. Their target was him. Chapter 772. 3 against 1. Xiaofan wondered if he should help, but Wuxia didn't seem like he wanted him to. Xiaofan decided to observe the situation first. After all, this was a battle between the Han tribesmen. Wuxia's excitement when he first saw these three tribesmen was now replaced by intense disappointment. Although he was mentally prepared, he still felt disappointed when he saw them in person. A greenish-black fist quickly enlarged in Wuxia's eyes. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. A strong murderous intent radiated from his opponent's arm. He raised his arm as if he had gathered all his strength into a spear. He didn't say anything, but his intention was clear. Kill. His opponent's face was covered by linen cloth, so he couldn't see his face. However, Wuxia recognized him. Other than this person, there were two other people covered in yellow linen cloth. Although they had been asleep for a long time and most of their memories were blurry, Wuxia could still recognize them. As soon as the two men moved their arms, they revealed their intentions. They opened their fingers with dark brown sharp nails, drawing a brown ray of light in the air. Along with the sharp sound of an arrow piercing through the air, they were like the fangs of a poisonous snake that could not wait to bite its target. Wuxia didn't dodge this attack. Instead, he chose to face the combined attack of the three people head-on and collided with them. Boom! Their fists and arms collided with each other, creating shockwaves that stirred up the wind. Shockwaves spread in all directions. The fists and fingers of the three people covered in yellow linen cloth were like carefully forged hammers and spears. They easily left deep marks on the large rock Wuxia was sitting on. Xiaofan could even see the sparks that flew when their long, brown fingernails scratched the rock. In the next moment, these fingers, which were as sharp as the claws of fearsome beasts, were pointed at Wuxia's face with cold murderous intent. The three of them seemed to be suppressing Wuxia and forcing him to retreat step by step. The four of them didn't have any weapons, but the sound of their fists, palms, and legs colliding with each other was like the sound of metal clashing against metal. Their fierce fighting style didn't seem like something a normal person could do. They were like wild beasts that had gone mad and were fighting with no regard for their lives. Every time Wuxia took a step back, it was as if he was under great pressure. Every time he stepped on the ground, the grass would be blown away, the ground would collapse, the soil would break, and the pebbles would fly up into the air. The dry areas were even cracked from the impact. In just a few seconds, the trees were broken one by one. Some were broken by Wuxia, and some were broken by the four of them. The originally flat ground was now full of potholes. What used to be a complete patch of green grass now looked like debris that could be removed at any time. For a moment, the pebbles on the field were scattered. It felt like the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. The four people fighting felt like they were in the middle of a turbulent storm. Wuxia's body was covered in wounds. Some of his flesh was even dug out by the sharp fingers. Many of his bones were broken. If it was a normal person, his face would be twisted in pain, but Wuxia didn't seem to feel it. The three people were also kicked away by Wuxia. The sound of bones breaking could be heard clearly. But in the next moment, they got up and continued fighting without any injuries. Su Lu listened to the continuous banging sounds and remembered the pain he felt when he was beaten up by the Luoya king. He couldn't help but shiver. Just listening to the sounds made him feel pain all over. The three people were different from the normal puppets he usually saw. They were indeed the helpers his father hired. What kind of power was this? Were they the real undying monsters? Chu Su, who was standing next to Su Lu, looked over. Of course, he knew that these were the real undying monsters. At the same time, he felt sorry for the ancient corpse that was stolen. Looking at the three people fighting, Chu Su's heart was bleeding. One of the ancient corpses should have been his, but it was stolen by the Yanjiao people. Now, looking at the attacks of the three people, it was obvious that they wanted to destroy the corpse. He didn't know if he would be able to see the corpse in one piece after the battle. His lord's goal was to get rid of the ancient corpse. Chu Su felt that it was a pity, but there was nothing he could do. Since the Yanjiao people had the ancient corpse under their control, he could only destroy it. He didn't know what method the Yanjiao people used to change the ancient corpse. What a pity. If this body was made into a puppet, how much help would it be to me? Chu Su sighed and looked at Xiaofan angrily. His eyes were filled with venom. He sneered and thought to himself, once I get rid of that ancient corpse, you won't be able to run away either. Xiaofan also noticed Chu Su's gaze. He could have gone over and killed the two defeated puppets right now, but he was more concerned about the battle between the four Han tribesmen. As for Su Lu and Chu Su, they were just small fries. If Chu Su was the one controlling the three puppets, Xiaofan would have attacked him without hesitation. But now, Xiaofan could see that Chu Su couldn't really control the three puppets. In other words, the three puppets' actions against Wuxia were beyond Chu Su's control. Chu Su, Su Li's companion, couldn't compare to the three puppets in terms of speed and attack power. He recalled the puppets he encountered in the desert and compared them to Chu Su. Not only were the auras they exuded different when they attacked, even the energy they wielded was different from Chu Su's. The one controlling the three puppets was even stronger. Who else was around? Xiaofan carefully sensed his surroundings again. There was no one else around. If the person who made the puppets didn't follow them, then there was another possibility: these three puppets could act without their master's help. These three puppets were given some kind of command. Chu Su only turned on the switch of the command. He wasn't the one controlling the puppets. Xiaofan could see with his special vision that there were two types of energy in the three puppets' bones. They came from two different fire seeds. One was the fire seed energy of the Han tribe. It was the energy that originally existed in the three puppets' bodies. The other was the energy that seeped into their bodies to control them. However, this energy was different from the energy in the puppets Xiaofan saw in the desert. It was also different from the fire seed energy he knew. It didn't seem to be complete. It was as if someone had purposely filtered this energy. The energy that conflicted with the fire seed energy in the three puppets' bodies was removed, leaving only the energy that could coexist with the fire seed energy of the Han tribe. These two powers coexisted in the bodies of the three puppets. For example, if the power of the Han tribe's fire seed in the three puppets was equivalent to the torso and limbs of a person, then the other power was equivalent to the brain of the body. It was the master of the body. As the four people fought fiercely, the cloaks on their bodies were gradually destroyed and torn apart by the wind from the fists and claws. The three people who had originally covered their faces with linen cloth now revealed their faces. The three of them looked just like Wuxia when he first laid in the coffin. They looked like dried corpses. The only difference was that Wuxia was in a state of suspended animation. The three of them, on the other hand, had lost their consciousness. From the moment they were turned into puppets, they were no longer the Han tribesmen they used to be. Wuxia hit one of them and sent him tumbling in the air for more than 20 meters. Taking advantage of this small gap, he tore off the tattered linen cloth on his body and threw it away. It was already sunset and the sun would disappear soon. There was no need to cover himself. The injuries he suffered in the forest outside the Lu tribe had already healed. Even the scars had disappeared. The new injuries on his body were much more serious than the last time. Some of his internal organs were even damaged. There was no time to breathe. After he hit one of them, there were still two more. They didn't show any mercy and attacked Wuxia's shoulders, abdomen, and limbs. Xiaofan looked at the situation on the other side and frowned. Wuxia's mentality wasn't right. Although the three of them were very strong, as if they were well-trained men of sacrifice, Wuxia didn't even have the strength to fight back. He had been fighting them with brute force, but he didn't use his full strength. If he used half of the strength he used in the forest outside the Lu tribe, he wouldn't be in this situation now. This wasn't good. If this continued, even Wuxia, who was stronger than normal people, would be crippled. Xiaofan took a step forward and was about to help when Wuxia shouted, "Don't interfere." Hearing Wuxia's words, Xiaofan paused and retreated back to his original position. He didn't want to go any closer. Since Wuxia wanted to solve this himself, he would do it himself. No matter what the consequences were, he had to accept it. In fact, Xiaofan didn't have to help him. Xiaofan knew that Wuxia didn't want outsiders to interfere. However, his actions just now were a reminder to Wuxia that if he didn't change his attitude, he would really die. Wuxia was also forced back by the three of them. Although he didn't show it on his face, his heart was filled with helplessness and anger. He knew that these three people wanted to kill him. After he heard the news from Robber 11, he thought about how he should face his former tribesmen. However, he still hesitated when facing these three people. After all, they were Han tribesmen. In this world, there were probably only a few Han tribesmen left. The other Han tribesmen had long disappeared with the passage of time. Wuxia was distracted for a moment. A series of bone-cracking sounds came from his chest and he flew into the air. In the next moment, another person appeared behind him and punched him. Wuxia's feet didn't even touch the ground before he was sent flying again. This was a true encirclement attack. Wuxia had a strange feeling. It was as if his soul had left his body. At this moment, he was like a bystander, quietly watching his body get injured. The other three people didn't hold back their murderous aura at all as they attacked. The 11 Han tribesmen who had merged with their fire seeds were already stronger than others. One could imagine how much damage they could do. In fact, Wuxia felt that he should give up on living. His tribe was no more. Besides him, there were no other Han tribesmen in this world. What was the point of him staying in this world? However, there was another thought in his heart. It was because of this hidden thought that he didn't mind looking for other tribesmen who had merged with their fire seeds. He also looked for people from the other side of the sea who no longer lived as a tribe. He wanted to get an answer from these people, an answer that would convince him. At this moment, when he was so close to death, Wuxia suddenly felt that under the threat of death from these former tribesmen, he seemed to have seen through the thoughts in his heart. Wuxia seemed to see 11 glowing figures appear in the endless darkness. They seemed to be talking about something. He knew that it was when the shamaness had chosen the 10 of them to solve the problem of the fire seed. She had called them over for a final talk. At that time, they were already prepared to sacrifice their lives for their tribe and their fire seed. But what happened next? In the dark void, their glowing figures gradually disappeared. First, it was the figure who seemed to be seriously injured. Then, it was the others. 1, 2, they all disappeared into nothingness. In the end, only one figure was left. It was Wuxia himself. Did the Han tribe disappear? No, it was still here. As long as he was alive, the Han tribe would always exist. Even if he was the only one left in the tribe. A single person's tribe proved that the Han tribe still existed in this world. It hadn't been abandoned by time. Puff puff puff. 3 people, 6 hands. One hand with sharp nails pierced through Wuxia's shoulder from the front, one fist into his chest, and one hand from the back. It almost brushed past Wuxia's spine and almost pierced through it. 2 more hands were grabbed by Wuxia. The last hand was originally aiming for Wuxia's head. However, it stopped when it was half a palm away from Wuxia's face. Wuxia looked at the 2 people in front of him. Their shriveled faces were no longer recognizable. However, Wuxia could clearly remember what they used to look like. Unfortunately, you are already dead, Wuxia said slowly. All of you are dead. Every word was like a boulder that had been lifted from his heart. But I can't die. When the last word was said, the last trace of sadness in Wuxia's eyes disappeared completely. It was replaced by a cold glint, like an unsheathed blade. His red eyes shone with a bloody light. Su Lu and Chu Su didn't know what was going on when they saw the sudden stalemate. What's going on? Su Lu was stunned. Why did they stop fighting? Go on, just one more move. Chu Su felt his eyelids twitch. A chill ran down his spine. He had a bad feeling. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Take his head and come back. Chu Su yelled anxiously. However, the 3 puppets seemed to be frozen in place. They didn't react to Chu Su's words at all. Xiaofan was also shocked by the situation. It seemed like Wuxia was going to be dismembered. However, the situation was developing in a strange direction. It wasn't that the 3 Han people who were turned into puppets suddenly gained consciousness. Instead, it was that the power that supported their movements had changed. With his special vision, Xiaofan could see that the energy in the 3 puppets was surging towards Wuxia's body. The air around them began to change. Xiaofan could clearly feel that the sweat on his body was quickly drying up. The water vapor in the air seemed to be rapidly sucked away. The energy of the fire seed. Xiaofan was very sensitive to the energy of the fire seed. The energy of the fire seed was similar to the energy in Wuxia's body. The fire seed of the Han tribe. Although the fire seed of the Han tribe was gone, it was still in the bodies of the 11 people. Of course, the 3 puppets that Su Lu brought with him had it too. But now, Wuxia was sucking out the energy of the fire seed from the 3 puppets. A leaf fluttered down. Then, more leaves fell. Xiaofan looked up. The green leaves on the tree started to fall one by one. The wind shouldn't have caused this. Upon closer inspection, the stems of the falling leaves had dried up. Taking a deep breath, Xiaofan whistled hastily. Cha-Cha, who had been watching from the sky, wanted to fight the 4 desert eagles several times. When he heard Xiaofan's whistle, he quickly descended. Xiaofan jumped onto the eagle's back. Let's go. Something big was about to happen. Wuxia, who had been standing there quietly, suddenly widened his eyes and let out a long whistle. It was different from the last time at the Flaming River Castle. There was a faint rumbling sound, like a blizzard or a tsunami. It also seemed to be mixed with the roars of beasts. It was very strange. Following Wuxia's roar, the aura around him started to increase rapidly. The mountains not far away started to shake and the ground started to shake. Even though Cha-Cha had brought Xiaofan away from the ground, he could feel a chill on his skin. It was as if there was a powerful force attacking the forest. No matter how slow Su Lu was, he knew that the situation had changed. It was something they didn't want to see. His forehead was covered in cold sweat because of Gan Xie's whistle. Xiaoxian's actions reminded Su Lu of something. Quick! Run! Su Lu whistled and waited for the desert eagles in the sky to come down. However, the desert eagles were too afraid of the danger on the ground. After hearing Su Li's whistle, they only circled around and didn't land. Su Lu was so angry that he wanted to kill all 4 of the eagles and feed them to his slaves. However, now was not the time to be angry. He felt the shadow of death looming over this place. Run! Su Lu screamed in his heart. If the desert eagles didn't come down, Su Lu could only run on his own. Chu Su saw that the 3 spiritual puppets didn't respond for a long time. He gritted his teeth and ran with all his might after Su Lu. Crack, crack, crack. Sounds like beans popping rang out continuously. Su Lu didn't even dare to look back. Gan Xie felt the energy gathering in his body. This energy wasn't pure. Some of it didn't belong to the fire seed of the Han tribe. When he absorbed it, this energy repelled him. This was the energy that controlled the 3 tribesmen. The moment he absorbed it, Gan Xie could feel his skin being torn apart. As he absorbed the energy from the fire seed of the 3 tribesmen, this external force entered his body. Gan Xie felt as if a knife was piercing into his bones, but he had to face it. Perhaps the person who made the puppets had considered this possibility. If Gan Xie forcefully absorbed the energy from the 3 tribesmen, not only would he fail, but he would also lose his life. Just as the external force was attacking him like a knife, trying to disrupt Gan Xie's absorption process, another force appeared in Gan Xie's body. It blocked the external force and allowed Gan Xie to continue absorbing the energy. This was the force Xiaoxian used to wake him up. This force had always existed in Gan Xie's body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Gan Xie crazily sent the absorbed energy into every meridian and bone in his body. He sent it to every part of his body. Live. He had to live. He had to take back the energy that belonged to the fire seed of the Han tribe. Pass. Come. Gan Xie could feel the power of the fire seed in his body surging violently. It was as if thousands of ferocious beasts were charging at him at the same time. The bulging veins in his body moved like wild pythons, jumping up and down. His tensed muscles moved, and his bones creaked. It was as if they were being stretched, compressed, or reassembled. Lines appeared on Gan Xie's naked body. The crisscrossing totem patterns were like tough vines that lived in the driest parts of the desert. They crisscrossed and spread all over his body. Gan Xie seemed to hear the familiar sound of blood flowing in his veins, but he knew that it wasn't real blood. It was the flow of the fire seed's energy. As his aura continued to rise, Gan Xie let out another deafening roar. This roar was even more frightening than the previous one. It was as if there was a vast power within it. Everyone's hearts clenched as they listened to it. It was as if there was an ancient beast that had just awakened. The energy that Gan Xie had absorbed finally exploded at this moment. The murderous aura that erupted was like the night in the desert in Rock Hill City. It was cold and dry. Gan Xie's hair that had already rotted over time started to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. It wasn't the color of a normal person's hair. It was white. On his bald head, strands of white hair rushed out from his scalp. They were lifted up by the shockwave and extended upwards. On his fingers, brown claws that looked like ferocious beasts extended from his bones. They reflected the last rays of the sun, but they didn't have a trace of warmth. A sand-yellow flame started to appear around Gan Xie's body. It rushed up from the bottom. The grass under Gan Xie's feet instantly dried up. It was as if it had lost all its moisture due to the high temperature. Under the ground, there seemed to be a powerful force that was about to break through. Boom! The sand-yellow smoke suddenly expanded rapidly, exploding like a sound wave, spreading in all directions. Everywhere it passed, the grass and trees withered, the leaves on the trees all fell, and the withered branches let out brittle cracking sounds, breaking and falling to the ground. Su Lu and Chu Su, who thought that they had escaped the danger zone, were also shocked by this scene. They turned around and tried to run further away. However, it was already too late. The sand-yellow flame had already spread to where they were. Their running footsteps became slower and slower. Their legs started to shrivel up from the soles of their feet. As for the three puppets, their bodies started to disintegrate from the places where they touched Wuxia. It was as if they were weathering rocks. They were disintegrated into tiny particles of dust and were blown away by the shockwave. Wuxia was the only one who stood there quietly. He was like a sharp blade in the cold desert under the night sky. Chapter 773. The sky was completely dark and the surroundings were dead silent. The sand-yellow flames started to fade until it completely disappeared. The aura of the Han fire seed gradually disappeared as well. Xiaofan looked down and saw that Wuxia was still standing in his original position. Cha-Cha was a little further away from the sand-yellow flames, so Xiaofan couldn't see what had happened to Wuxia. He could only see that his bones were brighter than before. This meant that the fire seed's power had changed his body again. It was as if his body had been carefully forged. Out of the four people who were fighting together, only Wuxia was left. The other three had disappeared. The moment the fire seed's power was completely drained, the three of them were truly dead. After all, their bones had turned to ashes and their fire seed's power had been drained. There was nothing left to support their movements. However, he didn't know how Wuxia was doing right now. He didn't know if Wuxia was still sane. Xiaofan didn't plan to go down for now. He didn't know if the person who went berserk just now would attack him again. On the other side, Su Lu and Chu Su were running away. They seemed to be affected by the sand-yellow flames. Their steps weren't stable and they weren't fast either. On the ground, Wuxia finally moved. His footsteps made squeaking sounds on the ground. The tattered cloaks left behind by the three Han puppets were blown away by the wind. Wuxia glanced at the cloaks and then looked away. He turned towards the direction where Su Lu and Chu Su were running. Rustle, 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 the footsteps were getting faster and faster. Su Lu and Chu Su heard the sound of footsteps approaching them. When they thought of the scene they just saw, they didn't have the courage to fight anymore. A strong murderous intent was approaching. They could even hear the sound of an arm cutting through the wind. Chu Su staggered and fell to the ground. One of his teeth was broken by a rock on the ground. He didn't even have the time to complain about his broken teeth. Chu Su grabbed a rock and threw it at the ground without even turning his head back. Bang! A few sparks flew in the night. The stone thrown by Mao Yu had already been broken into several small pieces. Chu Su listened to the commotion behind him, and his heart started to race. That ancient corpse didn't look any different from the others, so why did it become like this? What on earth had the Yanjiao done? As he was thinking, Chu Su felt a burning pain on his back. It was as if thorns had swept across his back and scraped away his flesh. Ah! A blood-curdling scream rang out in the dark night, causing Su Lu, who was running in front, to shudder. He quickened his pace. Su Lu thought that if Chu Su could buy him some more time, he would be able to escape. However, after a miserable shriek, Chu Su went silent. Su Li's scalp tingled as the hissing noises approached him quickly. His legs were a little sore and numb, probably because of the yellow sand flame just now. He couldn't display his usual state at all. However, the person behind him was like a berserk beast, closing in on him with all his strength. Previously, Su Lu thought that the distance between them had widened and he still had a chance to escape. Now, he knew that he was too naive. In the air, Xiaofan listened to the blood-curdling screams and the constant thumps on the ground. He knew that Su Lu and Chu Su wouldn't live to see the next day. Rather than calling it a chase, it was more like Wuxia was venting his emotions. Although the three puppets had lost their original consciousness and were now killing machines, they were still part of the Han tribe. Perhaps they had a good relationship with Wuxia a long time ago. Let's leave first and find a place to rest. We'll continue tomorrow. Xiaofan didn't know how long Cha-Cha would remain in this state. He told Cha-Cha to rest on a nearby mountain. After flying for a whole day, Cha-Cha was tired. Plus, Cha-Cha felt that Wuxia was extremely dangerous. He had never gotten close to Wuxia before, so he was more than happy to leave. There were no longer any trees in the nearby mountains. Perhaps there were some plants and animals that didn't manage to escape in time, but they still had some life left in the yellow sand flame. However, they would need a long time to recover. At least, they wouldn't be able to return to their previous state in a short period of time. The next day was still a sunny day. Xiaofan went over to take a look. Wuxia hadn't left yet. Instead, he was sitting on a rock, maintaining the same posture. No one knew what he was thinking. If it wasn't for his white hair and the sharp, dark brown claws on his fingers, Xiaofan would have thought that he was the same as before. Wuxia's breathing had stabilized. When he heard footsteps approaching, Wuxia turned around. Xiaofan saw a pair of bloodshot eyes and two fangs protruding out of Wuxia's mouth like a beast's. Xiaofan was speechless. This was a big change. Seeing Xiaofan's shocked expression, Wuxia looked at the claws on his hands. He activated the newly gathered fire seed energy in his body and the totemic patterns on his body gradually disappeared. The dark brown claws retracted into his fingers. Even the two fangs on his mouth disappeared. No one knew what kind of lethality was hidden in this seemingly weak body. Wuxia's body structure was different now. Compared to a normal person's skeleton, there were many more strange structures. For example, his spine was mutated. Every vertebra was elongated horizontally. There were also many new structures in his arms and legs. It was just that they were covered by his skin and flesh, so it wasn't obvious on the surface. The fire seed could change a person's body structure. This was the first time Xiaofan had seen this in a human body. Many warriors in the tribe would experience changes when they used their totemic power, but it was only temporary. When everything was over, they would return to their original form and have the same skeletal structure as the others. However, Wuxia was different. Compared to his previous form, the changes were huge even under normal circumstances. Moreover, Wuxia was able to absorb the fire seed energy in the three puppets for his own use. Xiaofan was confused. Not everyone could do this. Seeing that Wuxia had no intention of attacking and seemed to be conscious and not hostile, Xiaofan asked, "What do you plan to do?" "Work together." "How about it?" This meant that he would return to the Yanjiao tribe's territory with Xiaofan. They wouldn't go to the desert for the time being. Xiaofan looked at Wuxia in surprise and nodded. "We'll talk about the cooperation later. First, you should find a cloak." After yesterday's battle, Wuxia was almost naked. Xiaofan didn't want to bring him everywhere. After hearing Xiaofan's words, Wuxia remembered that he wasn't wearing a cloak. No wonder he felt uncomfortable. The sun was out. Wuxia raised his head and looked at the sun in the sky. The sun couldn't hurt him, but it made him feel uncomfortable. After absorbing the fire seed energy from the three people, the feeling became stronger. It was strange. Not far away, Chu Su and Su Li's corpses were covered in a layer of dust. Even without the dust, it was impossible to tell what they looked like. Even if the people from Rock Hill City were here, they might not be able to recognize them. Last night, Xia's attack was filled with anger and murderous intent. After Xiaofan and Xia left, the sun was hanging high in the sky. 5 figures appeared on a mountain. They were tribesmen who lived in this area. What do you guys think happened here last night? The people who came over asked carefully as they climbed up the mountain. Their eyes scanned their surroundings cautiously. Their tribe wasn't very close to this place, but they could still hear the sounds from here. They even felt a terrifying energy wave. However, no one dared to come out. One reason was that it was inconvenient to move at night. If they weren't careful, they could lose their lives. Another reason was that they felt that with their meager strength, if an accident were to happen, they would not have the confidence to escape. The sudden surge of power at that time was too terrifying. Could it be fearsome beasts? Someone guessed. Impossible. There are no fearsome beasts here. Unless they were brought here by someone. Also, the shaman said that the energy wave felt like a fire seed. We don't know what happened. Is there a tribe merging fire seeds? We've been here so many times. How can we not know where there are tribes? But the truth is, there are no tribes there. As they spoke, the 5 of them climbed up the mountain. Their tribe was further away from here. Every time they came here, they would climb the mountain because there would be some edible fruits on the mountain. They would take those fruits back when they climbed the mountain. Tightening the bamboo baskets on their backs, they panted and wiped the sweat off their foreheads. They looked in front of them. That was where the energy wave came from last night. However, when they saw the situation there, they were so shocked that they froze. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Their jaws dropped and they didn't react for a long time. They rubbed their eyes and looked again. That's right, it was still the same. What happened here? The 5 of them stood at the top of the mountain, stunned. In front of them, as far as their eyes could see, the grass and trees had all withered. The flowers that should have bloomed in clusters during this season had all withered. There was no beautiful color. Everything, the green trees, the various flowers and plants, had all turned yellow. It was as if the vitality of this place had been sucked out overnight and turned into a land of death. When they finally came back to their senses, they rolled and crawled away from here. They ran back to their tribe. They wanted to tell the news to the people in their tribe so that they would never come here again. Maybe the people who came here would suddenly become the same as the grass and trees there. Not long after, there were all kinds of rumors in this area. Some said that a king beast had appeared, some said that a tribe had deliberately created all this, and some linked it to the people on the other side of the sea. In short, there were different opinions. After all, no one had seen the truth of all these changes with their own eyes. Chapter 774. Xiaofan and Xia were both very fast. Xiaofan was carried in the air by Cha, so he was much faster than people on the ground. They didn't need to climb mountains. Xia was different from normal people, so he didn't feel tired even after running for a whole day. In less than 3 days, Xiaofan caught up with the main group in front. Seeing Xiaofan return safely, the Yanjiao people finally relaxed. Are you okay? Guang Yi looked at Xiaofan. Xiaofan didn't look injured. I'm fine. Those people weren't after me in the first place. Xiaofan briefly explained what happened to Su Lu and Chu Su. Guang Yi looked at Xia. Xia had changed his clothes so he couldn't recognize Xia's face. However, he remembered that Xia's skin was always pale and he always looked like he was short of blood. He was also bald. Why did he suddenly have white hair? Moreover, his complexion was much rosier. How strange. Due to his own face blindness, Guang Yi asked the others and got the same answer. He's changed so much. And I feel like. Guang Yi's eyes scanned Ganxia's body. His instincts told him, this person seems to be more dangerous than before. The other Yanjiao warriors beside Guang Yi nodded in agreement. Although they couldn't tell much, their instincts were trained from years of hunting in the mountains. Xiaofan told Guang Yi and the others about Ganxia's transformation and the changes that happened. At least they had a rough idea so they could be prepared for anything that involved Ganxia in the future. You're saying that the forest we were resting in and the mountains nearby have all turned into dead lands? If the person speaking wasn't Xiaofan, Guang Yi would have thought that he was lying. The power of the fire seed is really strong. But it's understandable considering the power of our ancestors. Guang Yi remembered the power Xiaofan used to bring them across the sea. That wasn't something a normal person could do. Yes, yes, yes. That's right. When the other Yanjiao people heard Guang Yi's words, they weren't as surprised. Especially the Yanjiao people who came from the other side of the sea. They had experienced it firsthand, no one knew better than them how shocked they were. After everyone left, Guang Yi lowered his voice and asked Xiaofan, he's not a threat to Yanjiao? He pointed at Ganxia. His current enemy is Rock Hill City. Right now, he's still no match for them, Xiaofan said. As for the Rain tribe, they were still ranked behind Rock Hill City. Understood, Guang Yi already knew what Xiaofan meant before Xiaofan finished his sentence. Since Ganxia's enemy was Rock Hill City and he was a powerful person, they could work with him. At the very least, they wouldn't treat him as an enemy. Ganxia needed allies and Yanjiao didn't mind having another force to fight against Rock Hill City. The group met with some trouble along the way but they were all dealt with. Although the Lu tribe lost some of their reared beasts, it wasn't a big loss compared to their overall strength. The reared beasts that were too weak to keep up with the group were all slaughtered in advance to be used as food. The cubs were locked up in cages and pulled around in carts. They met some traveling groups along the way. Initially, when they saw the Lu tribe's reared beasts, they had some ideas. However, when they saw that the Lu tribe were Yanjiao tribesmen, they gave up on that idea. Then, when they saw that even the Yanjiao Grand Elder was with them, they gave up on that idea. Those who frequented the Flaming River trading point didn't know the other Yanjiao tribesmen but they still remembered the most important ones, especially Zheng Luo and Grand Elder Xiaofan. The Lu tribesmen were very wary of these traveling groups. When they saw another traveling group, they became even more vigilant. The people in this group were all burly and looked like bandits. The axes and hammers they carried were stained with blood, but they couldn't tell if it was human or beast blood. There were beast hides and some other things in the carts they were pulling. They're from the Flaming River trading point. Guang Yi only needed to glance at the carts to know the answer. He didn't remember the people but he remembered the beast hides and bones from the Flaming River trading point. Although the goods in the carts were covered with cloth, it wasn't very tight. Guang Yi could tell just by looking at a small corner. Xiaofan looked at the traveling group and fixed his gaze on the leader of the group. He had some impression of that person. Coincidentally, the leader also looked over so Xiaofan nodded slightly in greeting. He recognized me. When the leader saw Xiaofan smile, his palms started to sweat. If they really wanted to attack, they had to get rid of Xiaofan as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any peace in the future. Even if they never went to the Flaming River trading point again, they would still be hunted down by the Yanjiao tribesmen if they stayed in their own tribe. Thinking quickly, the leader gave Xiaofan a stiff smile. Then he turned to the people in the traveling team who were still watching the Lu tribe raise their beasts and shouted, "What are you looking at? Hurry up!" Thus, the Lu tribesmen watched as the traveling team left. Many of them looked as if they wanted to rob them immediately, but they held back and followed the team as they left. Looking at the Yanjiao tribesmen and the traveling group leaving, Bai Xing was secretly glad that they chose to travel with the Yanjiao tribesmen. This saved them a lot of trouble. When the group finally saw a stone tablet with a Yanjiao totem on it, the Lu tribesmen were the most excited. This stone tablet was a directional sign. It told them which direction to go to reach the Flaming River trading point. We're finally here. Moving a tribe not only made them physically tired but also mentally stressed. Especially since they had just merged with their fire seed, they felt even more lost and uneasy. The Lu tribesmen didn't need to go to the trading point. Their destination was somewhere upstream from the trading point. Since we're already here, let's split up. Xiaofan led the Yanjiao tribesmen towards the trading point. After all, everyone was going in different directions. Wait! Bai Xing hurriedly called out to Xiaofan and walked over in large strides. He was afraid that Xiaofan would leave with his tribesmen if he was too slow. When he saw the Yanjiao tribesmen looking at him in confusion, Bai Xing forced an awkward smile. Brothers from Yanjiao, can we trouble you to bring us along again? We'll pay you extra. We definitely won't let you come for nothing. When Xiaofan saw Bai Xing like this, he understood that they were afraid that the travel teams here would rob them. There were too many travel teams near the trading point and most of them weren't easy to deal with. Bai Xing's worry was not without reason. That's fine too. Xiaofan looked at the Yanjiao tribesmen. They didn't seem to be unwilling. It wasn't far anyway. Some of them were even interested in seeing which piece of land the Lu tribesmen had their eyes on. They wanted to test the waters first so they could visit them in the future. Hence, Xiaofan brought the Lu tribesmen to their destination before returning to the trading point. There are more people at the trading point now. Xiaofan noticed the situation as soon as he entered the trading point. It wasn't the people from the other side of the sea. Instead, there were many tribesmen with unfamiliar totemic tattoos. Some of them were probably here for the first time. Everything they saw was new to them and they were wary of everyone. Wuxia silently ran to the secret underground room to continue thinking about life. Xiaofan asked Zheng Luo about the recent situation at the trading point. These new tribesmen also lived on the banks of the Flaming River. However, some of them lived further away from Yanjiao. Some of them lived in secluded locations so they weren't discovered by Yanjiao. What are they here for? Xiaofan asked. They said they want to learn how to merge the fire seed from us. Many of them have already gone to see the chief. Go back to the headquarters and take a look. Gigu probably has many questions for you, Zheng Luo said. Xiaofan didn't stay long at the trading point. He left and went straight to the headquarters. When Xiaofan arrived, Gigu was looking at an animal skin scroll with a frown. On it was a map that Xiaofan had perfected. Xian, you're finally back. Gigu quickly waved when he saw Xiaofan. There's something we need to discuss. Gigu looked worried. Xiaofan had never seen Gigu so troubled before. It didn't seem like Yanjiao was in danger. It was probably something else. What do you need to discuss? Xiaofan asked as he looked at the map. Many tribes want to become Yanjiao's vassals. That's a good thing. I know, but there are some problems that we can't solve. Gigu told him about the problems that he couldn't solve. Ever since Yanjiao named the Flaming River, tribes in other parts of the mainland started to think about how to name the rivers, lakes, or mountains near their tribes. It was as if naming a place meant that it was their territory. It also carried a special sense of pride. Although most of the tribes living near the Flaming River were small tribes, they had their own ideas. As the name of the Flaming River spread and Yanjiao's influence grew, these small tribes started to think about naming their rivers. However, Yanjiao named the Flaming River using force to make everyone accept this name. People in other parts of the river might not be happy with Yanjiao's naming of the river, but they had no choice but to accept it under the threat of Yanjiao's brute force. However, in other parts of the river, the tribes kept arguing because of the naming battle. In terms of strength, everyone was equal. If they continued to fight, both sides would suffer. In the end, someone suggested asking Yanjiao for help to solve this problem. After all, Yanjiao was the second most powerful tribe in the Flaming River region. No one would dare to say that they were the best. Asking the boss for help was the idea of a follower. Naming is secondary. What I'm worried about is how to divide the area. Gigu pointed at the map. On it were the locations of many tribes and some typical geographical features such as mountains, rivers, lakes, and so on. Gue, he thought further. Not only did he want to solve the problem of naming those people, but he also wanted to do more things. For example, he wanted to categorize those tribes. After quietly listening to Gigu, Xiaofan nodded. I understand what you mean. Really? What do you think? Gigu asked expectantly. Do you have animal skins that haven't been written before? Yes. Gigu hurriedly passed him the animal skin, paint, and pen. Xiaofan drew lines on the animal skin. Gigu compared the lines that Xiaofan drew. The main river was the Flaming River, while the branches were the tributaries. Most tribes live near water sources. Xiaofan pointed at the lines that he drew. He used red paint to mark the main river and blue to mark the tributaries. We call the area where the main river and the tributaries flow through the Flaming River Basin. Gigu's eyes lit up when he heard the words, Flaming River Basin. Xiaofan's next words touched Gigu's itch. As for the problem you mentioned, we can use the water system to divide it. Chapter 775. Water System. Gigu's interest was piqued. Xiaofan pointed at the different-shaped tributaries. We'll use the tributaries network to divide the tribes. For example, there are 3 large tributaries in the Flaming River Basin. For example, the one closest to us, its tributaries and lakes form a network of water systems. We'll use the water system to divide the tribes so that it's easier to manage them. Next time, when you mention a tribe, just tell us the water system they're in and remember what it looks like. That way, we'll be able to identify the tribe easily. Yes. That's it. Gigu didn't know how to express his confusion. Now, Xiaofan's suggestion of dividing the tribes by the water network easily solved Gigu's problem. In the past, if I didn't look at the map, I wouldn't even know where a tribe was when they mentioned it. Even if we need to inform them, we need to have a pattern and order. That way, it'll be faster. Plus, more and more tribes are coming to Yanjiao. If more tribes join us in the future, we can continue to add them. There were so many tribes, but now, there were even smaller tribes that lived in seclusion. Although there weren't many people in the Flaming River Basin, there were still many tribes. It was just that most of the tribes didn't occupy large territories and didn't have many people. Most of them only had a few hundred people. Small tribes needed to stick together to survive. The external threats were getting bigger and bigger, and the competition within the mainland wasn't small either. Most of the tribes living in the Flaming River Basin weren't large. Even if a single tribe could maintain their peace for now, it wouldn't last long. Soon, they would be attacked by all sorts of forces. Before Xiaofan went to the Lu tribe, he had told the tribesmen to inform the other tribes in the Flaming River region to be wary of outsiders, especially those who came from the other side of the sea. People who came at this time were not here for sightseeing. Even the Chonglis, a group that didn't specialize in robbing, almost made the Flaming Horns suffer losses, let alone those who came with ulterior motives. The Lu tribe was a good example. If the Flaming Horns didn't go there, they would have either been taken away by GNFA, or they would have been slowly divided up by other people with ulterior motives. Now, even the Hui tribe and the Tian Shan tribe, who used to hate each other, joined forces to resist the outsiders. Apart from these 2 tribes, no other tribe could take the lead. The Central Plains had already made all sorts of preparations, so there was no need to worry. Flaming River was about to make their move too. This was the question that Gigu had been thinking about all this time. The small tribes in the Flaming River region were already smart enough to look for someone to rely on. They wanted to rely on Yanjiao to survive. At this time, Yanjiao had many things to do. Xiaofan listened to Gigu's thoughts. Gigu didn't plan to imitate the slave masters on the other side of the sea and establish a kingdom for the time being. The situation in the tribes was more complicated. Many tribes had just merged their fire seeds or just had the idea of merging their fire seeds. For thousands of years, the tribe's ideology was the most important thing. They wouldn't bow down and obey orders in just a few years. Bloody suppression wasn't a wise idea. The Thousand Masks tribe was able to imitate the Flaming River tribe's rule in the central region because those tribes had been dependent on them for many years. In the Flaming River region, the tribes had always been independent. Some of them didn't even want to work with other tribes. If it wasn't for the circumstances, they wouldn't have come out of hiding. There's something else, Xian, you might not know, Gigu said. What is it? Xiaofan asked. I only heard about it when you went to the Lu tribe, Gigu said in a low voice. Slave masters are coming. Slave masters? Xiaofan was puzzled. If it was just a regular slave master, Gigu wouldn't have specially mentioned it at this time. Literally, those people took the tribesmen away, especially the children who haven't awakened their totemic powers. They sold them to the people on the other side of the sea as slaves. Otherwise, why would those tribes who have been hiding or didn't want to get close to us be in such a hurry to find us? There weren't many people in the small tribes here and the children were targeted by outsiders. After all, children who hadn't awakened their totemic powers were easy to deal with, easy to transport and easy to train. How could the tribesmen remain calm when their new blood was taken away? No wonder they were in such a hurry to go to Yanjiao. They were looking for a big helper because the other tribes in the Flaming River region wouldn't be able to help them. More and more people probably found other ways to cross the sea. They don't need to cross the sea from the desert, they can sail from other places, Xiaofan said. The longboat tribe had only opened one of the sea routes. Naturally, others could open other routes. The sea route could transport more people. Compared to when the disaster had just ended, there should be a lot more people coming over. On the other hand, the tribesmen were just starting to break free. There were already many mature organizations on the other side of the sea. They worked well together and these ignorant tribesmen couldn't compare to them. Even if many people realized that their children had been taken away, they couldn't solve the problem in such a short time. They couldn't even reduce the probability of this happening, let alone find them. That's why we need to form an alliance, Gigu said. An alliance of tribes? Xiaofan already guessed what Gigu was thinking when he found out about Gigu's worries. Dragon Head. Gigu wanted to form an alliance with the other tribes in the Flaming River region. Yanjiao would be the leader of this alliance. That's right. Gigu's eyes burned with passion. Yanjiao still doesn't have enough people. Even if the Taiha tribe, Drumming tribe, and Rain tribe join us, it's still too little. I already had this plan when the trading point was first set up. I just couldn't wait for the right time. Now, the chance is here. Yes, some tribes had been influenced by fixed beliefs for a long time. Even if Gigu had a plan, it wouldn't be successful. But now, Yanjiao didn't even have to look for them. They came looking for them on their own. In this crisis, they each looked for a way out. The desire to survive and the development of their tribes forced these people to come out. This was also the first step for the tribesmen who shunned the world and didn't want to interact with other tribes. They had to change in order to survive. But there are many things that need to be done to form an alliance like this. It was rare for Gigu to find someone who could completely understand him. He quickly explained his doubts and troubles. Gigu's troubles could be summed up in one word: order. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. If they followed Gigu's plan to form an alliance, there had to be rules and regulations. They had to let them know the rules of the Flaming River Region's alliance. Otherwise, they would think that they would be protected and helped by Yanjiao. Then they would do whatever they wanted. They would fight amongst themselves and fight amongst themselves. If Gigu didn't help them today, he would gloat over their misfortune the next day. That would be a mess. Order. Gigu paused. Yes, we have to make some rules. Since we're here, we have to make some rules. We have to tell them what to do and what not to do. Otherwise, they'll be kicked out of the alliance. Yanjiao wanted to form an alliance to become stronger. At the end of the day, it was for survival and development. It wasn't a charity. In this kind of environment, with the threat from the outside world growing stronger, if they couldn't continue to be strong, they would be defeated one by one. In this place, only the strong were respected. Xiaofan discussed with Gui He and a few important figures of the tribe for 3 days. Even Zheng Luo, who was guarding the trading point, and Duo Kong, who often stayed at the trading point, were called back. At this time, the trading point was filled with people. The number of foreign tribesmen had increased. Logically speaking, Zheng Luo should be at the trading point every day, but that wasn't the case. All the tribesmen in the trading point had been keeping an eye on the Flaming Horn tribe's movements. They couldn't go to the Flaming Horn headquarters, so they could only observe from the trading point. These few days, they noticed that 2 important figures in the trading point, Zheng Luo and Duo Kong, were acting strangely. Something big is going to happen. EC looked away from the door and sighed. Something big? Will it threaten us? Grasshopper asked carefully. Yanjiao's strength determined their lives. He didn't want anything to happen to Yanjiao. No, it's a good thing. EC was in a good mood. He smiled and said, I'm afraid there's going to be a big change here. A good change. He was right to come here. Grasshopper immediately broke into a big smile. As long as Yanjiao was fine, he was happy. Their life here was much better than when they were on the other side of the sea. As he was thinking, a Yanjiao warrior hurried over and handed a scroll to EC. The head elder gave this to you. After handing the scroll to EC, the warrior hurriedly left and ran towards the Flaming River Castle. EC gave Grasshopper a look. Grasshopper quickly walked to the door and guarded it. He didn't want anyone to have a chance to sneak in and peek at the scroll. After opening the scroll, EC raised his eyebrows. He closed the scroll and said, Grasshopper, close the door. We have important things to do. This is our chance to prove our worth. Grasshopper's expression immediately turned serious. He was just a follower. His quality of life was closely related to EC. It was obvious that Yanjiao had a mission for EC. If EC completed the mission well, he would definitely be treated well. As a follower, he would naturally have a better life. While EC was completing the mission given to him by the head elder, no one was allowed to come in and disturb them. Anyone who came in and disturbed them would be going against them. Grasshopper's eyes were filled with murderous intent. No one was allowed to come in during this period. He would tear apart anyone who made things difficult for them. Gradually, everyone in the trading point noticed a strange atmosphere. Even some of the tribesmen who had just arrived felt that something was brewing and was about to break out of the ground. They continued to wait anxiously and uneasily. This was because Yanjiao's higher-ups, those above the team leader, had not appeared in the trading point for 3 days straight. They refused to meet with them. While everyone was speculating, Yanjiao announced a big announcement. Yanjiao would establish a great alliance in the Flaming River Valley. They would establish a new order here. Anyone who was willing to follow the new order of the alliance could join the alliance. Yanjiao's current chief, Gigu, current shaman, Guizhe, and head elder, Xiaofan, jointly issued the first Flaming River Gathering Order. The chiefs of the tribes in the Flaming River Valley who were willing to follow the new order and join the alliance could head to the Flaming River Trading Point to participate in the Great Alliance Banquet. The order explained the new order in detail. Yanjiao would naturally play the role of leader in this alliance. Anyone who wasn't willing could step forward and settle it with force. Of course, no one would be stupid enough to step forward at a time like this. The tribesmen who came to the trading point for various reasons hurriedly left the trading point after hearing the contents of the order. They had to inform their own tribes of this important news. Zheng Luo stood on top of the Flaming River Tower as he listened to the reports from the people at the entrance of the trading point. He looked at the figures running quickly in the distance and asked Xiaofan, "Can the Great Alliance really develop as expected?" "That depends on how many tribes are willing to join," Xiaofan said as he looked at the animal skin scroll in his hand. Xiaofan was holding a curved line on the animal skin scroll. That was a section of the Flaming River, which was also the section they knew of so far. On this line, there were no tributaries for the time being. But soon, Xiaofan believed that there would be more and more lines on this animal skin roll, just like the roots of a tree. The roots would grow longer and longer, and the branches would grow more and more. The drumming tribe. Abuli looked at the order he had just received and studied it carefully. In the end, he still didn't quite understand it. He knew that the flaming horns wanted to gather everyone together, but he couldn't guess the deeper meaning behind it. As for the new order mentioned in the order, he actually didn't have any objections. As long as it didn't harm the tribe's interests, he was willing to accept anything that was beneficial to them. To put it simply, Abuli's current mentality was to cling on to Yanjiao's thick thighs. He wouldn't lose anything anyway. At least after coming into contact with Yanjiao, their tribe's lives were getting better and better. There was no doubt about that. "I want to go to Yanjiao for the banquet, who wants to?" Before Abuli could finish, the crowd around him exploded. Me. Bring me along. Chief, look at me. Look at my feet, they're so big, how can you not bring me along? Abuli saw that many people were already standing upside down and fighting with their feet. He snorted. He still remembered the first time he said he wanted to go to Yanjiao. Many people objected and didn't want to go. But now? They were all so enthusiastic that they even fought with their feet for a spot. At a certain section of the Flaming River, on a mountain some distance away from the Flaming River, a group of people gathered at the entrance of a cave. Flaming River Basin? Chief, are we part of the Flaming River Basin? Someone asked anxiously. They just found out that the river was called the Flaming River not long ago, and their tribe wasn't close to the river. He was worried that Yanjiao's Flaming River Basin didn't include their tribe. The person standing at the entrance of the cave carefully held a scroll. His eyes were filled with doubt. After carefully studying the few sentences on the scroll, he comforted himself. The Flaming River Basin doesn't just refer to the main stream, there are tributaries too. We're very close to one of the tributaries, so we should be part of the Flaming River Basin. Yes, we definitely are. Let's pack up and get ready to go to the Flaming River Trading Point. Who wants to go with me? Me. Chief, I'll go. I'm strong. I can run fast. I haven't been upstream yet. What do the Yanjiao people look like? I don't know. I heard from the Yi people that the Yanjiao people look like fearsome beasts. Really? I want to know how many tribes have joined us. Not many, right? I don't know many tribes either. That's because you don't know. There must be many more. What's with the noise? We'll know when we get there. The chief who shouted carefully put away the scroll in his hand, then turned around and went into the cave to pack his things. He hadn't traveled far for many years, so he was quite nervous. However, the Yanjiao people were right. A small tribe couldn't face the coming attack alone. One of the words, "fight the enemy together," was enough to tempt him. Chapter 776. This was the first time Yanjiao publicly announced a gathering of tribes. This time, the tribes in the central region were not included. This was different from the grand banquet when the Flaming River trading point was first established. This gathering would have a huge impact on the Flaming River Basin. All the tribes living in the Flaming River Basin, regardless of whether they were willing to join the Great Alliance or not, would not be able to change the current situation. The Flaming River Basin was about to undergo a huge change. Some people were happy while others were worried. The people in Yanjiao, especially the higher-ups, had not slept well for the past few days. What could they do? They were under a lot of pressure. If only a few tribes were willing to join the gathering, wouldn't that be embarrassing? That was why everyone, including Gigu, was worried. Only Xiaofan was still doing what he was supposed to do. "Boss, how many tribes do you think will come?" Duo Kong stood at the top of the Flaming River Tower, the tallest building in the trading point. He stood under the flag with the Yanjiao totem on it and looked at the sparsely populated trading point. He could not hide his nervousness. Zheng Luo sighed and looked outside the trading point. "I don't know. At least 10. Duo Kong counted with his fingers. The Rain tribe, the Taiha tribe, the Drumming tribe, and the Lu tribe, who had just arrived, would definitely not refuse to join the alliance. As for the Pu tribe, the Drumming tribe, the Ya tribe, the Drumming tribe, and the others, Duo Kong didn't know much about them. There were also tribes further away and those who came from Yinghai. They had no choice but to come to Yanjiao for the first time. Even if many of them were unwilling, there should be at least 1 or 2 tribes who were willing to join the Great Alliance, right? 10, there should be. Duo Kong encouraged himself in his heart. After convincing himself, he felt a little more confident. When they first learned of Gue He and Xiaoxian's plan, they were also quite surprised. The scenario that Xiaoxian described was what they wanted to see, but after all, it was just a fantasy that had yet to happen. As for the outcome, they could only wait and see. "We haven't heard the horn today." Zheng Luo looked at the setting sun and sighed. "It's still early. It should sound in a few days," Duo Kong said hesitantly. After leaving the Flaming River Tower, Zheng Luo walked out of the trading point. There were 3 gates to the trading point. After the order was issued, one of the gates was remodeled and became the largest of the 3 gates. The 2 sides of the door were built with huge stones, which were then carved into the shape of 2 huge beast heads. The ratio was almost 1-to-1. Of these 2 types of dire beasts, one was a carnivorous giant dire beast, and the other was a herbivorous giant dire beast. The former had the sharp fangs of the carnivorous dire beasts, while the latter had some huge hard horns. They were both among the top dire beasts in the forest, and were not easy to hunt. Every time such dire beasts were hunted, it required a planned encirclement and teamwork. This time, when they remodeled the gates to the trading point, they made the design of 2 dire beasts. Although the dire beasts' heads were carved out of stone, the fangs and horns embedded in the statues were genuine. They were the treasures the tribe had collected over the years. This time, they used them to build the walls. The carvings of the 2 dire beasts' heads were not very detailed. Many parts were not smooth and had a rough feel, but it was enough to let people see the general shape of the 2 dire beasts' heads. Also, because it was not detailed enough, the rough parts added a rough, wild, and mysterious feeling to the statues. The stones used to make the dire beasts' heads were above average. This time, Yanjiao had invested a lot. It was no wonder that Zheng Luo and the rest were nervous and felt pressured. This gate was the largest gate in the trading point, and it was also the gate that Yanjiao had invested the most. The Yanjiao people called this gate the Beast Head Gate. The horn that Zheng Luo mentioned before was the horn that was placed in the 2 dire beasts' heads. If the people guarding this gate discovered that a tribe had responded to the summons, they would blow the horn to let others know that a tribe had arrived. Unfortunately, they had not heard a single sound of the horn. The drumming tribe, Taiha tribe, Rain tribe and Lu tribe didn't come immediately because they were very close to the Flaming Horn tribe. When the Flaming Horn tribe said the feast would start, they would come immediately. They had already made their stance clear. It didn't matter if they came early or late. That was why the Flaming Horn tribe was mainly waiting for the tribes that were further away. Looking at the beast head gate, Zheng Luo asked the guards, "Have you seen the Grand Elder?" "I think he's over there." A guard pointed in a direction. Zheng Luo walked in that direction. That was where the king's stoneworm used to live. Yanjiao had claimed the land but had not started construction yet. Their original plan was to expand the trading point and connect it to the other side. However, they did not have enough people. Now that the trading point was big enough to accommodate everyone here, they did not need the other side. When Zheng Luo saw Xiao Xian was sitting in the stone forest. He was holding an animal skin scroll and drawing something on it. Zheng Luo went over to take a look but did not understand. "What are you drawing?" asked Zheng Luo. "A design." Xiao Xian put down the pen in his hand and moved his stiff neck. He had been sitting here for a whole day. "A design? You plan to expand the trading point?" Zheng Luo was shocked. If it wasn't for expansion, what was the point of drawing a design? Maybe it's time to expand. Xiao Xian stood up from a rock. "But you said before that we don't have many people. We don't need this place for now." "There will be more soon," said Xiao Xian. Zheng Luo understood what Xiao Xian meant by, "there will be more soon." "You're so optimistic about this gathering?" Seeing Xiao Xian's calm demeanor, Zheng Luo felt a little more confident. Originally, he came to Xiao Xian to ask Xiao Xian to use not divination, but now it seemed that there was no need. Xiao Xian had already expressed his opinion. After thinking it through, Zheng Luo felt the pressure on him lessen. Since Xiao Xian was so confident, he would wait a little longer. Xiao Xian was optimistic about this gathering because of his intuition and because he had already sent the people to spread the news. Most of the tribes in the Flaming River region didn't like foreign tribesmen, but they didn't have enough power. They hadn't come up with a plan yet because of the lack of information. What Xiao Xian asked the tribesmen to deliver wasn't just a message, but also a message to let them know that the invaders were stronger and more ambitious. There were a lot of them too. Small tribes had to unite to have a better chance of survival. The Flaming Horns tribe was like a core, and the other tribes gathered around this core. If it weren't for the foreshadowing and the threat of the foreign tribesmen, Xiao Xian didn't know how the other tribes would react. What was done was done. All that was left was to wait. At the trading point, after Zheng Luo left, the Yanjiao warriors guarding the beast head gate were also discussing and guessing how many people would come. Every time the horn sounded, a tribe would come. That was why even if they weren't on duty, they could still hear the horn. "How many tribes do you think will come?" 5? Bullshit. There are already 4 tribes around here. It's definitely more than 5. 7? 9? I'm guessing 10. I'm guessing 20. Definitely not 20. I'm guessing 15. The Yanjiao tribesmen weren't the only ones discussing this. The expedition teams that came to the Flaming River trading point were also discussing this. Many of them had already completed their trade and should have left long ago. Who knew that Yanjiao would send out a call to form an alliance? When they heard this, their curiosity was piqued and they decided to stay for a few more days to see how effective Yanjiao's call would be. Many of them wanted to make fun of themselves. Of course, most of them wanted to join in the fun. Let's bet. Let's guess how many tribes will come. I'm betting under 10. I'm betting under 10 too. I'm betting on Yanjiao. I'm betting under 15. I'm betting 20. 20? Are you crazy? I think Yanjiao is so strong. There will definitely be many tribes coming. The person who bet 20 had a serious expression on his face and said confidently. Bootlicker. The others cursed in their hearts. He knew that there were Yanjiao tribesmen watching him, so he said that on purpose. If not, why would he only bet 1 beast tooth? If he was so confident, why didn't he bet 10 beast teeth and 20 beast hides? The outsiders and Yanjiao tribesmen who stayed in the trading point were all ears, waiting for the horn to sound. Unfortunately, the horn didn't sound for a few days. However, some tribes were far away, so they wouldn't be able to get here so quickly. Plus, this was a big deal, so they had to discuss it. But as the days passed, the horn still remained silent. It wasn't until the 7th day that the drumming tribe arrived that the horn sounded for the first time. Then, on the 10th day, the chief of the Ya tribe brought 100 Ya tribesmen out of the underground tunnel and entered the trading point. The horn sounded for the 2nd time. On the 15th day, the drumming tribe and Jing tribe arrived at the trading point together. The horn at the two-headed beast gate sounded twice. After the 15th day, the horn sounded more frequently in the following days. Not only would it sound every day, but it would also sound several times in a row. After all, some of the smaller tribes were already in contact with each other, so it was safer to travel together. There were more tribes in the Flaming River Basin. The number of tribes that were willing to follow the new order and join the Great Alliance continued to increase. Perhaps some were still observing, but some had already started to take action. On this day, Xiaofan walked out of the stone forest. The man-made river that was dug out surrounded the stone forest and the trading point. This river not only solved the problem of ships not being able to pass through the Flaming River Bridge, but it also formed a line of defense. Every day before the sky turned dark, the suspension bridge would be closed to stop people from entering this area. Therefore, if anyone needed to cross the river, they had to do it before the sun rose. When Xiaofan walked across the river from the suspension bridge, he saw some greenish-black figures with protruding bones on the surface of the river. The water rippled as the figures swam. These were the fish that the Di Shan tribe gave to Xiaofan. After Xiaofan threw them into the river, he didn't care about them anymore. He left the trading point and went to the Lu tribe. When he came back, these fish were already as long as an arm. Their growth speed was astonishing. According to the patrolling warriors, the pterosaur had been feeding these fish, and it was still doing so. Xiaofan didn't know what the pterosaur wanted to do, but as long as it didn't want to eat the fish, it was fine. He could help raise the fish. Woo! The low sound of the horn pierced through the clouds and reverberated throughout the forest. Xiaofan looked towards the trading point. Another tribe had arrived at the trading point. They didn't use the suspension bridge, so they must have come directly from the Flaming River using boats. More and more tribes arrived over the past few days. Zheng Luo and the rest felt more at ease. There were already more than 10 tribes here, which was more than they expected. Now, they just had to continue waiting. The tribes further away might need a few more days to arrive. Xiaofan didn't look at the trading point again. After he left the river, he walked around and observed the terrain. He wanted to see if he needed to add more defensive measures. We should cut down some trees. It'll block the view of the people on the other side of the river. As he thought, Xiaofan suddenly stopped and looked towards the forest not far away. There were people coming over. There were quite a few of them. Rustle, the sound of their bodies brushing against the branches and grass wasn't loud. It was obvious that the other party had purposely held back and was very cautious. Thud thud thud. There was the sound of hard objects hitting each other. It sounded like some kind of bone ornament. Xiaofan stood there without moving. He didn't try to hide himself either. The other party must have noticed him. That was why the person walking in front paused for a moment. Soon, the people walked out from the forest. Their clothes were mainly made of animal skin, and there were many bone ornaments. Especially the leader, he had a lot of animal teeth and bone ornaments hanging from his head to his feet. According to the habits of most tribesmen, this should be considered a grand dress. Xiaofan looked at the people in the group. They were all young and strong, all totemic warriors. Regardless of gender, they all had a sharp aura around them. This was a tribe that was good at fighting. Who are you? One of the people in the group took 2 steps forward and stared at Xiaofan cautiously. The leader only turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes casually sweeping across the group, stopping the others who were about to speak. His arms seemed to be raised casually, but it was like a city wall, stopping the people in the group who were about to step forward. A traveler? Or a tribesman who answered the summons? The leader asked in a deep voice. Xiaofan was about to answer when he frowned and turned to look in another direction. Someone else was coming. Bang! The person who asked the question just now stepped on the ground and his aura increased. His animal skin clothes flapped in the wind. Originally, the clothes were loose, but with the appearance of the totem patterns and the continuous increase of the totem power, his body swelled, and the animal skin clothes became tight. When he waved his arms, the airflow made a whooshing sound, like the whistling of the winter wind, biting cold and full of a murderous aura. After that person, the others in the group also activated their totemic power and looked in the same direction cautiously. Soon, another group of people appeared in that direction. The person walking in front looked at the group not far away and sneered. Thunder Mountain Tribe? I didn't expect you to come too. Drumming Tribe? What are you doing here? The Thunder Mountain Chief's tone was very bad. It was obvious that the relationship between the two parties wasn't very good. Same as you, of course. The Drumming Chief's eyes flashed coldly. Xiaofan, who was standing there, was ignored by both sides. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.